Welcome, fellow wanderer of the Four Nations and beyond, to the complete chronicle of Avatar lore, a journey through 10,000 years of spiritual wisdom, elemental mastery, and the eternal cycle of balance that binds all worlds together. Tonight, we explore not just individual stories, but the vast tapestry of knowledge that spans from the first Avatar to the Industrial Age, from ancient spirits to modern innovations. This is a tale of civilizations rising and falling, of wisdom passed through generations, and of the eternal dance between order and chaos that shapes all existence. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let your mind drift through the ages as we traverse the millennia together. Welcome to the Primordial Age, when the world existed in two distinct realms, separated by an invisible barrier that few dared to cross. In those ancient days, long before the Four Nations took shape and millennia before any human had dreamed of bending the elements to their will, the physical and spirit worlds coexisted in a delicate balance that would soon be forever altered by the actions of one extraordinary soul whose curiosity would reshape the very nature of existence itself. The lion turtles roamed through oceans that stretched beyond any horizon mortal eyes could perceive, their shells forming entire continents upon which humanity had built its earliest civilizations. These magnificent beings, ancient beyond measure and wise beyond comprehension, served as both sanctuary and prison for the scattered tribes of humans who had not yet learned to harness the fundamental forces that governed their world. Each lion turtle carried upon its vast carapace a different element: air that danced in endless spirals, water that flowed in patterns too complex for simple minds to follow, earth that stood solid and unchanging through countless seasons, and fire that burned with the passionate intensity of life itself. The humans who sheltered upon these living islands knew their place in the cosmic order with absolute certainty, their daily routines shaped by traditions that had been passed down through generations, who had never questioned the wisdom of their ancestors, or imagined that their circumstances might be anything other than permanent fixtures of reality. They ventured forth from their turtle shell cities only when necessity demanded it, seeking food or materials that could not be cultivated within the safety of their mobile homes, always returning before darkness fell, and brought with it the dangers that lurked beyond the protective aura that each lion turtle maintained through spiritual power older than recorded history. The spirits ruled the wilds with authority that was both absolute and capricious, their dominion extending over every forest and river, every mountain peak and desert valley that existed beyond the boundaries of human settlement. These beings of pure energy and elemental essence viewed the physical world as their domain by right, their presence transforming ordinary landscapes into realms where the normal laws of physics held no sway, and where human understanding proved inadequate for navigating safely through terrain that shifted according to spiritual whim rather than natural principle. Into this carefully ordered world was born Wan, a young man whose restless spirit and insatiable curiosity would prove to be both blessing and curse for all who knew him. Unlike his companions, who accepted their circumstances with patient resignation, Wan possessed an inner fire that demanded answers to questions that others feared to ask, a hunger for understanding that could not be satisfied by the simple explanations that had contented previous generations of humans who had learned to find peace in accepting their limitations rather than challenging them. The streets of Wan's home city reflected the rigid social hierarchy that governed all aspects of human existence on the Fire Lion Turtle, with the wealthy elite occupying the highest platforms, while the poor struggled to survive in the lower levels, where sunlight rarely penetrated and fresh air was a luxury that few could afford. The Chu family controlled the distribution of food and resources with an iron grip that left no room for compassion or flexibility, their guards ensuring that rebellion was swiftly crushed and that questions about fairness or justice were never allowed to disrupt the stability that their rule provided. One's theft of food intended for the ruling class was motivated not by simple hunger, but by a profound sense of justice that could not tolerate the sight of children starving while their oppressors feasted in luxury. His decision to challenge the established order came with full knowledge of the consequences that such defiance would bring, yet his moral compass pointed toward action even when wisdom might have counseled patience and acceptance of circumstances that seemed impossible to change through individual effort alone. The punishment that followed was swift and merciless, one's banishment from the lion turtle serving not merely as consequence for his specific crime, but as warning to others who might be tempted to question the authority of those who held power over life and death decisions. The ceremony that accompanied his exile was designed to ensure that no one could mistake the finality of his fate, his former community watching in silence as their protectors transported him beyond the boundaries of safety into a realm where survival was measured not in years or months, but in days or hours. The hunting party that escorted one into the spirit wilds was composed of men who had made their peace with the necessity of their task, while harboring no personal animosity toward the young man whose idealism had sealed his fate. They understood the harsh mathematics of communal survival that made examples necessary for maintaining the social order, yet their professional competence was tempered by human sympathy that expressed itself through small gestures of kindness and the gift of supplies that might extend his life beyond the few hours that banishment typically allowed. The spirit wilds that one entered were unlike anything human imagination could have prepared him to encounter, a landscape where trees grew in impossible directions and where the ground itself seemed to pulse with consciousness that regarded his presence with suspicion bordering on hostility. The very air he breathed carried energies that made his skin tingle with sensations that had no names in human language, while sounds echoed through the forest that spoke of intelligence and purpose, beyond anything his previous experience had equipped him to understand or navigate successfully. The spirits that inhabited this realm viewed one's arrival with a mixture of curiosity and contempt, their ancient memories filled with encounters with humans who had proven themselves to be destructive and unpredictable creatures, whose presence inevitably brought chaos to the delicate balances that maintained spiritual harmony. Yet something in this particular human's demeanor suggested possibilities that others of his species had not displayed, a quality of attention and respect that made them willing to observe his behavior rather than simply destroying him immediately as prudence might have dictated. The bunny spirits whose assistance saved one from certain death during his first night in the wilds were drawn to help him not by any grand plan or prophetic vision, but by simple recognition of desperate need and genuine innocence that shone through his terror and confusion. Their decision to guide him to safety established the first bond of trust between human and spirit that would eventually blossom into something far more significant than anyone involved could have imagined during those initial moments of tentative cooperation. The discovery of the oasis where light and dark spirits maintained their eternal balance came to one through a combination of luck, spiritual guidance, and the kind of desperate determination that pushes individuals beyond their normal limitations when survival depends upon finding resources that seem impossibly distant. The clearing where Rava and Vatu conducted their 10,000-year dance of cosmic forces was both sanctuary and battleground, a place where the fundamental principles that governed all existence played out their eternal drama on a scale that reduced human concerns to insignificant details. Rava's presence filled the oasis with energies that promoted growth and harmony, her light nurturing the vegetation that provided shelter and sustenance. while creating an atmosphere of peace that allowed even the most fearful creatures to find rest and restoration. She embodied the principle of order that sought to create stability and predictable patterns that could support life in all its myriad forms. Her consciousness encompassing perspectives that spanned millennia while maintaining focus on the immediate needs of every living being that sought her protection. Vatu's darkness was not the absence of light, but rather the presence of forces that embraced change and transformation. His influence, encouraging growth through challenge and evolution through conflict, that tested the strength and adaptability of everything exposed to his power. He represented the cosmic principle that prevented stagnation by ensuring that no arrangement of forces could become so stable as to resist the changes that kept the universe dynamic and alive. His role in the cosmic balance, as essential as his counterparts, though far more difficult for limited consciousness to appreciate or accept. The battle between these primal forces was not combat in any sense that human minds could readily comprehend, but rather a cosmic dance of creation and destruction that had been playing out since the beginning of time itself. Their eternal struggle maintaining the dynamic tension that prevented the universe from falling into either the sterile perfection of unchanging order or the chaos of constant transformation that would make any form of stable existence impossible. One's interference in this cosmic drama came not from understanding of its significance, but from simple human instinct that saw apparent suffering and responded with compassion that transcended rational analysis of consequences. His decision to free Rava from Vatu's grip during one crucial moment of their struggle was motivated by the same sense of justice that had led to his banishment from human society, an automatic response to perceived injustice that acted before wisdom could counsel restraint or consideration of broader implications. The gratitude that Rava expressed for Wan's assistance was genuine and profound, yet her explanation of what his intervention had accomplished carried warnings about changes that could not be undone and consequences that would extend far beyond anything he could imagine. The temporary separation of the two cosmic principles that his action had achieved disrupted balances that had maintained stability for 10,000 years, creating opportunities for both unprecedented good and unimaginable destruction, depending upon how wisely the new circumstances were managed. The temporary fusion between Wan and Rava that enabled him to master firebending beyond anything previously thought possible provided him with his first taste of the power that would eventually make him the bridge between worlds. Yet the experience also revealed the tremendous burden that such abilities would place upon anyone who accepted responsibility for maintaining balance between forces that could reshape reality itself. The flames that he could now summon and control were not merely tools of destruction or illumination, but expressions of the creative force that animated all existence. The escape from the spirit wilds that Rava's power made possible brought one back into contact with human civilization at a time when his own people had given him up for dead, his survival seeming miraculous to those who understood the dangers he had faced, while his new abilities marked him as fundamentally changed by experiences that had transformed him into something more than merely human, yet not quite, transcendent of his mortal origins and limitations. The training that followed Wan's return required him to master not just the technical aspects of bending multiple elements, but the philosophical foundations that made such mastery possible, without being consumed by forces that were never meant to be channeled through individual consciousness. Each element demanded different approaches to understanding and control, their distinct characteristics requiring adaptation of both technique and mindset that tested every aspect of his character and commitment to the path that destiny seemed to be laying out before him. Air came to Wan through meditation and spiritual discipline taught by Flying Bison, whose ancient wisdom encompassed understanding of freedom and detachment that allowed consciousness to move unencumbered by the fears and desires that trapped most souls in patterns of suffering and limitation. The techniques they shared required letting go of the need to control outcomes while maintaining enough focus to direct elemental forces according to conscious intention, a paradox that could only be resolved through patient practice and gradual development of trust in forces larger than individual will. Water's lessons were provided by the moon and ocean spirits during night sessions that revealed the connections between all living things through the circulation of life force that ebbed and flowed according to cosmic rhythms that transcended individual existence while remaining intimately connected to every heartbeat and breath. The flexibility and adaptability that waterbending required taught one to yield without surrendering, to redirect opposition rather than meeting it with equal force, to find strength in apparent weakness and power in apparent surrender. Earth proved the most challenging element for one's naturally fluid personality to master. Its requirements for stability and stubborn determination, seeming to contradict every instinct that had enabled his survival during his adventures, in realms where adaptability and quick thinking were more valuable than steadfast commitment to fixed positions. The badger moles, who served as his teachers in underground caverns, demanded that he learn to stand firm against forces that sought to move him, to draw strength from connection with unchanging principles, even when surface circumstances shifted in ways that challenged his resolve. The second harmonic convergence approached with the inevitability of astronomical forces that operated according to schedules established at the universe's beginning, its arrival promising either restoration of the ancient balance or the establishment of entirely new arrangements that would reshape the fundamental nature of existence for all future generations. The alignment of spiritual energies that occurred during this cosmic event would amplify every action taken and every choice made, creating opportunities for transformation that came only once every 10,000 years. Vatu's escape from the prison that one's intervention had inadvertently created brought with it the full fury of cosmic forces that had been building toward release throughout the intervening period, his dark power now enhanced by rage over his confinement and determination to prevent any future interference with his cosmic role. The battle that ensued would determine not just the fate of individual lives, but the basic structure of reality for millennia to come, its outcome dependent upon whether wisdom and courage could triumph over raw power and ancient resentment. The final confrontation between Wan and Vatu took place not in any physical location but in the spiritual realm, where thoughts and intentions became visible, forces that could be shaped and directed through willpower combined with understanding of cosmic principles that governed the interaction between order and chaos. The combat required not just mastery of all four elements, but integration of their diverse characteristics into a unified approach that transcended any single elemental philosophy, while incorporating the essential truths that each tradition contributed to complete understanding. The fusion between Wan and Rava that occurred at the moment of ultimate crisis was not planned strategy, but desperate measure born of necessity when conventional approaches proved inadequate for dealing with forces that operated beyond normal categories of power and resistance. The joining of human consciousness with cosmic principle created something entirely new in the universe's history, a being capable of channeling spiritual energies through mortal form, while maintaining connection to both realms that such bridging was meant to serve. The victory that followed came at tremendous cost. One's individual identity, permanently altered by forces that no single consciousness was meant to contain, while Vatu's defeat created imbalances that would require constant vigilance and intervention to prevent from destabilizing the foundations of existence itself. The avatar that emerged from this cosmic merger was both more and less than human, blessed with abilities that could maintain balance between worlds, while burdened with responsibilities that would span lifetimes and require sacrifices that few could comprehend or accept willingly. The closing of the spirit portals that one implemented in the aftermath of harmonic convergence was intended as temporary measure to allow both humans and spirits time to adapt to changed circumstances. Yet the separation that this decision created would prove far more enduring and problematic than anyone involved could have anticipated. The barriers between worlds that seemed necessary for preventing immediate chaos would eventually create their own forms of imbalance that future avatars would struggle to address through methods that often created new problems while solving old ones. The establishment of the avatar cycle through one's death and spiritual rebirth created the mechanism through which cosmic responsibility could be maintained across generations while allowing individual personalities to develop according to their unique circumstances and cultural influences. Each incarnation would bring fresh perspectives to eternal challenges while drawing upon accumulated wisdom of previous lifetimes, creating continuity of purpose, despite constant change in approach, an understanding that reflected the growth possible when consciousness was not limited by single mortal existence. And so began the 10,000-year cycle of death and rebirth that would see the avatar spirit incarnate in each of the four nations in turn, learning their distinct approaches to elemental mastery and cultural wisdom, while maintaining the essential mission of preserving balance between forces that would otherwise tear apart the carefully constructed harmony that made civilized existence possible for all who shared the world that one's sacrifice had protected. The centuries that followed one's sacrifice witnessed the gradual emergence of human civilization, from scattered tribes sheltering on lion turtle shells into the four distinct nations whose cultural identities would define the world for millennia to come. The early avatars who inherited one's spiritual mantle faced challenges that went far beyond maintaining cosmic balance, serving as guides and mediators for peoples who were learning to shape their own destinies while adapting to a world where the boundaries between physical and spiritual realms had been forever altered by the first avatar's momentous decisions. The Great Migration from the lion turtles began not with dramatic exodus, but through gradual exploration, as small groups of humans ventured beyond the protective barriers that had sheltered their ancestors, driven by curiosity and necessity to seek new lands where they could build permanent settlements, rather than remaining dependent upon the whims of ancient beings whose own purposes remained mysterious, even to those who had lived upon their shells for countless generations. Each departing group carried with them the elemental gift that their guardian lion turtle had provided, yet they also brought distinct cultural traditions and philosophical approaches that would eventually blossom into the rich diversity that characterized the four nations. The air nomads were the first to establish their independence from their lion turtle benefactors, their natural inclination towards spiritual exploration and detachment, making the transition from mobile sanctuary to permanent settlement feel like natural evolution rather than traumatic rupture. The flying bison who had served as companions during their turtle-bound existence proved invaluable in locating suitable sites for temple construction. Their ability to navigate air currents and weather patterns, enabling the identification of mountain peaks that offered both isolation for spiritual practice and strategic positioning for maintaining contact between widely separated communities that shared common values despite geographic dispersal. The four air temples that rose from carefully selected mountain peaks represented architectural achievements that seamlessly blended human engineering with spiritual principles. Their spires and courtyards designed to channel wind currents in ways that created natural music while providing practical benefits for daily life and meditation practice. The Southern Air Temple's distinctive architecture featured towers that spiraled upward like frozen tornadoes, their internal spaces configured to amplify the sounds of prayer bells and wind chimes, while providing perfect acoustics for group chanting and individual contemplation that formed the foundation of Air Nomad spiritual development. The Eastern Air Temple's cliffside location required engineering innovations that demonstrated how airbending could be applied to construction projects of unprecedented complexity and ambition. Its buildings carved directly into living rock while remaining perfectly integrated with natural air currents that provided both climate control and the kind of constant, gentle breeze that made even the most strenuous physical activities feel effortless and harmonious. The temple's libraries were positioned to take advantage of natural lighting while protecting precious texts from moisture and temperature fluctuations that could damage irreplaceable documents containing centuries of accumulated wisdom. The Western Air Temple defied conventional architectural logic by hanging upside down from its mountain perch, its inverted towers demonstrating air nomad philosophy that sought to challenge assumptions and encourage new perspectives on familiar problems through approaches that forced visitors to abandon preconceived notions about how buildings should be oriented or how spiritual spaces should be organized. The temple's unique configuration made it accessible only by air, ensuring that those who came seeking wisdom were already committed to the journey while providing absolute security from ground-based threats that might endanger the peaceful communities that gathered there for study and meditation. The Northern Air Temple's position as the largest and most populated of the 4 sacred sites made it the de facto center of air nomad governance. Though their cultural commitment to consensus and spiritual guidance meant that authority was never concentrated in individual leaders, but rather distributed among councils of elders who made decisions through patient discussion and careful consideration of how proposed actions would affect not just immediate communities but future generations who would inherit the consequences of choices made in their absence. The water tribes found their new homes at the world's polar extremes, where harsh climate conditions that would have defeated less adaptable peoples became advantages that protected their developing cultures from external interference, while providing abundant resources for those clever enough to harvest the bounty that ice and sea could provide to communities willing to work in harmony with natural cycles rather than attempting to impose their will upon environments that demanded respect and understanding rather than domination and exploitation. The Southern Water Tribe established itself in regions where pack ice provided both foundation and raw material for construction projects that created buildings capable of withstanding storms that would have flattened structures built according to conventional architectural principles. Their ice block construction techniques, enabling rapid expansion or relocation, as changing conditions required adaptive responses that permanent stone or wood structures could never accommodate with equal flexibility and efficiency. The Northern Water Tribe's more protected location allowed for larger population concentrations and more elaborate construction projects that culminated in the Great Ice City, whose walls and towers demonstrated waterbending mastery, applied to architectural purposes on scales that impressed even visitors from nations whose building traditions emphasized permanence and monumentality over the fluid adaptability that characterized Water Tribe design philosophy and practical construction methods. The spiritual traditions that developed within Water Tribe culture reflected their intimate connection with lunar and tidal cycles that govern not just their physical environment, but their understanding of how cosmic forces influenced daily life and long-term community planning. Their calendar systems and religious observances carefully coordinated with celestial events that determined everything from hunting schedules to marriage ceremonies and coming-of-age rituals that marked important transitions in individual and community development. The healing arts that became central to water tribe identity evolved from practical necessity in environments where injuries could quickly become fatal without proper treatment. Yet their techniques transcended simple medical applications to encompass spiritual and emotional healing that addressed the whole person rather than merely treating symptoms. Their practitioners developing insights into the connections between physical health and psychological well-being that would influence healing traditions throughout the world for centuries to come. The Earth Kingdom's territorial expansion reflected both the practical advantages that earthbending provided for large-scale construction and agriculture, and the cultural values that emphasized stability, persistence, and the kind of patient determination that could accomplish seemingly impossible projects through sustained effort, applied consistently over extended periods that discouraged less committed peoples while enabling remarkable achievements that stood as monuments to the power of collective action, guided by clear vision and unwavering purpose. Ba Sing Se's founding as the Earth Kingdom's capital represented the ultimate expression of earthbending applied to urban planning and defensive architecture, its massive walls demonstrating capabilities that made the city virtually impregnable to conventional assault, while providing space for population growth that could accommodate millions of residents without overcrowding or the social tensions that plagued smaller communities when expansion exceeded the capacity of existing infrastructure to support increased demands on limited resources. The Great Wall system that protected Ba Sing Se was not merely defensive barrier, but complex engineering project that channeled water for irrigation, provided elevated roadways for rapid transportation and communication, and created microclimates that enabled agricultural productivity in regions that would otherwise have been too arid or exposed to support the intensive farming required to feed urban populations whose numbers exceeded anything previously attempted in human history. The agricultural innovations that Earth Kingdom farmers developed took advantage of their earth-bending abilities to create terraced fields that maximized crop yields while preventing soil erosion, their irrigation systems channeling water with precision that enabled cultivation of previously barren lands, while their storage and preservation techniques ensured food security even during difficult seasons when weather patterns or other disruptions threatened the harvest cycles that entire regions depended upon for survival. The Fire Nation's island civilization developed along different lines than the continental nations, their maritime environment encouraging exploration and trade that brought them into contact with diverse cultures and ideas, while their volcanic geology provided both abundant energy sources and the raw materials needed for metallurgy, craftsmanship that would eventually make them the world's most technologically advanced society. Their innovations in engineering and manufacturing, establishing foundations for the industrial developments that would transform global civilization in later centuries. The fire-bending techniques that evolved within Fire Nation culture reflected their understanding of flame, not merely as destructive force, but as source of creative energy that could power forges and kilns while providing heat and light that enabled community activities to continue regardless of weather conditions or seasonal variations. Their mastery of controlled combustion, leading to advances in cooking, manufacturing, and artistic expression that enriched daily life, while demonstrating the constructive applications of elemental abilities that other nations often viewed primarily in terms of combat or self-defense. The early Fire Lords established governmental systems that balanced centralized authority with local autonomy, their administrative innovations creating efficiency that enabled rapid response to crises while maintaining cultural diversity across islands, whose distinct identities contributed to the nation's overall strength through specialization that made different regions particularly skilled in specific crafts or industries that served the broader community's needs, while preserving local traditions and customs that might otherwise have been lost to homogenization. The naval traditions that developed within Fire Nation culture were driven by practical necessity in an island environment, where water transportation was essential for maintaining communication and trade between scattered communities. Yet their shipbuilding expertise and navigation skills eventually enabled exploration and contact with distant lands that brought new knowledge and resources, while establishing the foundation for the global influence that would characterize Fire Nation policy during later historical periods. The early avatars who guided these emerging civilizations faced challenges that required diplomatic skills as much as spiritual power. Their role as mediators between nations, demanding understanding of cultural differences that could create conflicts even between peoples who shared no natural reasons for hostility. Their interventions establishing precedents for international relations and conflict resolution that would influence global politics for millennia, while demonstrating how individual wisdom and moral authority could accomplish what military, force, or economic pressure could never achieve. Avatar Salai's mediation of the territorial disputes that arose as expanding populations created competing claims for prime agricultural and mineral resources, established principles of international law that emphasized negotiation and compromise over conquest and subjugation. Her patient work in facilitating discussions between representatives of different nations, showing how seemingly irreconcilable differences could be resolved through creative solutions that served everyone's essential needs while requiring all parties to abandon positions that seemed non-negotiable when viewed from narrow perspectives. The seasonal festivals that Avatar Salai instituted provided opportunities for cultural exchange that helped prevent the isolation and suspicion that could develop when nations focused exclusively on their internal affairs without maintaining regular contact with neighbors whose different approaches to common challenges might offer valuable insights and alternative methods that could benefit everyone willing to learn from experiences that transcended the limitations of any single cultural tradition or philosophical approach. Avatar Sato's contributions to Fire Nation governance during a period of internal strife demonstrated how Avatar authority could be used to strengthen institutions and promote justice without imposing solutions that violated cultural autonomy or traditional values. His administrative reforms creating systems that served citizens more effectively while respecting the historical precedents and social structures that provided stability and continuity during times of rapid change that might otherwise have produced chaos and social breakdown. The legal codes that Avatar Sato helped establish provided frameworks for resolving disputes and maintaining order that balanced individual rights with community needs. Their provisions carefully designed to prevent the abuse of power, while ensuring that authority figures could act decisively when circumstances required prompt action to protect public welfare. Their influence on Fire Nation jurisprudence lasting for centuries, while serving as models for legal development in other nations facing similar challenges. The bending martial arts that developed during this period reflected the integration of elemental abilities with philosophical principles that emphasized personal development and spiritual growth, rather than merely technical proficiency or combat effectiveness. The masters, who founded various schools and traditions, understanding that true strength came from harmony between mind, body, and spirit, rather than simple accumulation of techniques or raw power that lacked the wisdom necessary for responsible application. The White Lotus Society's origins during this era grew from recognition that wisdom and learning transcended national boundaries. The organization's founders understanding that the challenges facing human civilization required cooperation between individuals who shared common values, despite belonging to different cultures. Their network of scholars and spiritual practitioners creating resources for knowledge, preservation, and transmission that would prove invaluable during darker periods when political conflicts threatened to destroy the accumulated wisdom of centuries. The trading relationships that developed between the emerging nations created economic interdependence that provided incentives for peaceful cooperation, while enabling technological and cultural exchange that enriched all participants. The merchant classes that facilitated these connections, serving as informal ambassadors, whose personal relationships often proved more effective than official diplomatic missions in maintaining communication and understanding between peoples whose governments might be experiencing temporary tensions or disagreements. As these early civilizations matured and established their distinct identities, they laid the groundwork for the complex world that future avatars would inherit, their achievements and mistakes providing lessons that would guide decision-making for generations, while their innovations and traditions created the rich cultural heritage that would define human civilization's highest aspirations and greatest accomplishments throughout the ages that were yet to come. The era of Avatar Yangchen unfolded during a time when humanity's rapid expansion and growing confidence in their mastery over the physical world began to create tensions with the spirit realm that had been simmering beneath the Paotians. Surface of apparent prosperity for generations, their industrial innovations and territorial ambitions gradually encroaching upon sacred sites and spiritual territories that had remained undisturbed since the separation of the worlds following one's fateful decision to close the pacing Biyu, portals between realms that had once allowed free passage between dimensions of existence. Yang Chen's philosophy represented a fundamental departure from the approach that previous avatars had taken toward balancing human and spirit world interests. Her experiences growing up during a period of unprecedented human achievement, leading her to prioritize the welfare of mortal communities over the traditional deference that had previously been shown to spiritual entities whose ancient claims to various territories and resources increasingly came into conflict with expanding human settlements that required access to the same lands and waters for their continued survival and prosperity. The young Avatar's early years were marked by exposure to the suffering that resulted when human communities were forced to abandon productive farmland or valuable mining operations because spiritual inhabitants objected to activities that they claimed disrupted sacred sites or disturbed natural balances that had been maintained for millennia before human civilization had developed sufficient technology and population to create meaningful impact on environments that spirits considered their exclusive domain according to agreements made before mortals possessed the capability to honor or violate such compacts effectively. The festivals that Yang Chen instituted throughout her lifetime were carefully designed to maintain spiritual connections while accommodating the practical needs of human societies that could no longer afford to restrict their activities, according to spiritual preferences that seemed increasingly arbitrary and disconnected from the immediate welfare of communities struggling to feed growing populations. and protect themselves from natural disasters that spiritual intervention could prevent, but often failed to address when human suffering conflicted with spiritual priorities, or ancient grudges that predated current generations by centuries or millennia. The Spirit's Friendship Festival, that became the cornerstone of Yang Chen's diplomatic approach to human-spirit relations, represented her attempt to create structured opportunities for communication and negotiation that could resolve conflicts before they escalated into violence or forced migration. The celebration's emphasis on mutual understanding and shared benefits, demonstrating her belief that cooperation was possible when both sides were willing to acknowledge legitimate interests and make reasonable compromises that served everyone's essential needs, while requiring flexibility from all participants. General Old Iron's love for Lady Tianhai embodied the kind of profound spiritual bond that transcended normal categories of relationship and responsibility. Their connection, creating emotional depths that influenced the ancient spirit's decisions and reactions in ways that purely rational analysis could never predict or account for adequately. Their partnership demonstrating how love could inspire both the greatest wisdom and the most devastating mistakes, depending upon circumstances and the choices made by those whose actions were motivated by feelings too powerful for ordinary moral frameworks to contain or guide effectively. The human expansion into the coastal regions where General Old Iron and Lady Tianhai had established their sacred sites began innocuously enough, through fishing villages and seasonal camps that seemed to pose no threat to spiritual interests. Yet the gradual permanent settlement and industrial development that followed created cumulative impacts that transformed pristine environments into landscapes dominated by human activity and engineered according to human needs rather than the spiritual principles that had previously governed these areas, through natural processes that operated according to cosmic cycles rather than economic or political considerations. Lady Tianhai's attempts to bridge the growing divide between human and spiritual interests reflected her understanding that cooperation required genuine respect and meaningful accommodation from both sides. Her diplomatic efforts seeking solutions that would enable human communities to thrive while preserving the spiritual significance of sites that held meaning, extending far beyond their practical value to mortal inhabitants who saw only resources to be exploited rather than sacred spaces whose violation would have consequences that extended beyond immediate material concerns to encompass cosmic balances, whose disruption could affect realms and beings far removed from the immediate conflict zones. The tragedy that ultimately claimed Lady Tianhai's life emerged from the kind of misunderstanding and cultural conflict that Yang Chen's policies were intended to prevent, but which her pragmatic approach to human spirit relations may have inadvertently encouraged by creating expectations that spiritual concerns would always yield to human welfare when conflicts arose that could not be resolved through negotiation or compromise that satisfied both parties' minimum requirements for security and autonomy. The human settlers whose actions led to Lady Tianhai's death were not motivated by malice or deliberate disrespect for spiritual authority, but rather by desperation and ignorance that made them unable to recognize the cosmic significance of their actions or appreciate the consequences that their behavior would have for relationships and balances that extended far beyond their immediate community's survival needs. Their cultural background, providing no framework for understanding spiritual perspectives that operated according to principles that their education and experience had never prepared them to recognize. or appreciate. General Old Iron's grief and rage following Lady Tianhai's death transformed him from guardian and protector into an embodiment of spiritual fury that sought to prevent any future encroachment on sacred sites through displays of power that would terrify human communities into abandoning their expansion plans and returning to the more restricted existence that had characterized earlier periods when spiritual authority was unquestioned and human activities were carefully limited to areas that posed no threat to entities, whose power could reshape landscapes and redirect natural forces according to emotional states rather than rational planning or diplomatic negotiation. Yang Chen's response to General Old Iron's rampage required her to make choices that would define her legacy and establish precedents for how future avatars would handle conflicts between human welfare and spiritual rights. Her decision to oppose the ancient spirit, despite the legitimacy of his grievances, demonstrating her commitment to protecting human communities, even when doing so required actions that violated traditional understanding of the Avatar's role as neutral mediator, rather than partisan advocate for any particular group or species. The battle between Avatar and Ancient Spirit was not merely physical confrontation, but clash of philosophical approaches that represented fundamentally different visions of how the world should be organized and whose interests should take priority. When conflicts arose that could not be resolved through compromise or accommodation that served everyone's needs, Yang Chen's victory establishing human precedents while creating spiritual resentments that would influence relationships between realms for centuries to come. The industrial development that Yang Chen's policies enabled created prosperity and technological advancement that improved living conditions for millions of humans, while also establishing patterns of resource exploitation, environmental modification that would eventually create problems, extending far beyond the immediate conflicts with spirits that her interventions were designed to resolve, the long-term consequences of her decisions remaining largely invisible during her lifetime, but becoming increasingly apparent to subsequent generations, who inherited both the benefits and the costs of her pragmatic approach to Avatar. Responsibilities. The earth-bending innovations that flourished under Yang Chen's protection included architectural techniques that enabled construction of larger and more complex buildings than had previously been possible, their creators applying elemental abilities to engineering challenges that required unprecedented precision and coordination, while producing structures that could support growing urban populations without the overcrowding and sanitation, problems that had plagued earlier attempts at high-density residential construction that lacked adequate planning or sufficient resources for proper infrastructure development. The water-bending applications that developed during this period extended beyond traditional healing and combat techniques to encompass large-scale irrigation projects and water management systems that enabled agriculture in regions that had previously been too arid for productive farming. The masters who developed these innovations, understanding that their abilities could serve community needs that went far beyond individual protection or personal advancement to encompass collective welfare and economic development that benefited entire regions and nations. The firebending contributions to this era of human advancement included metallurgical innovations that enabled production of stronger tools and weapons, while also creating artistic and decorative objects whose beauty and craftsmanship demonstrated how destructive elemental abilities could be channeled toward creative purposes that enriched cultural life and provided expressions of spiritual insight that transcended mere material utility to encompass aesthetic and philosophical dimensions that elevated daily existence above simple survival concerns. The spiritual sites that Yang Chen worked to preserve represented her attempt to balance human development with recognition that certain locations possessed significance that justified protection from industrial or residential use. Her designation of sacred areas creating precedents for environmental conservation that acknowledged spiritual values while accommodating the expansion and development that human communities required for their continued prosperity and security in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. The training programs that Yang Chen established for future spiritual practitioners emphasized practical skills and diplomatic abilities that would enable them to serve as intermediaries between human and spirit communities. Their curriculum, combining traditional meditation and elemental techniques with conflict resolution and cultural sensitivity training that prepared graduates to handle the kind of complex negotiations and sensitive situations that characterized relationships between realms whose interests often seemed mutually incompatible. The philosophical debates that surrounded Yang Chen's policies reflected broader questions about the nature of avatar responsibility and the proper balance between competing claims and values that could not be reconciled through simple application of established principles or traditional wisdom. The discussions that emerged from her controversial decisions, establishing intellectual frameworks that would influence avatar training and decision-making processes for centuries, while demonstrating how individual choices could have implications that extended far beyond immediate circumstances. The economic prosperity that human communities achieved under Yang Chen's protection created resources and leisure time that enabled cultural and intellectual development on unprecedented scales, their artists and scholars producing works of literature, music, and philosophy that explored themes and questions that had been beyond the reach of earlier generations, whose energy had been consumed by basic survival needs, and whose opportunities for creative expression had been limited by material constraints and social restrictions. The technological innovations that emerged during this period included advances in transportation and communication that enabled more effective coordination between distant communities, while also facilitating the kind of cultural exchange and intellectual cooperation that enriched all participants through exposure to different approaches to common challenges and alternative solutions to problems that had previously seemed intractable when viewed from limited perspectives or addressed through resources available to individual communities working in isolation. The diplomatic relationships that Yang Chen fostered between human nations created frameworks for peaceful resolution of conflicts and cooperative approaches to shared challenges that demonstrated how international relations could serve mutual interests rather than becoming competitions for dominance or struggles for survival that produced only winners and losers, rather than solutions that benefited all participants through recognition of common goals and complementary capabilities. The legacy of suffering that General Old Iron's grief created would haunt future generations through his continued hostility toward human expansion and development. His periodic interventions, serving as reminders that Yang Chen's pragmatic choices had come at costs that could not be calculated purely in terms of immediate human welfare, but required consideration of spiritual perspectives and long-term consequences that extended beyond any single avatar's lifetime or responsibility. The moral questions that Yang Chen's approach raised about avatar neutrality and the proper balance between competing interests would continue to challenge her successors, each new incarnation forced to grapple with the precedents she had established while facing their own unique circumstances that might require different approaches to similar dilemmas. The complexity of her legacy, ensuring that her influence would continue to shape Avatar philosophy and practice long after her individual contributions had been integrated into the larger pattern of wisdom that each Avatar inherited from their predecessors. As Yang Chen's era drew to its close, the world she left behind was more prosperous and technologically advanced than any previous generation had known. Yet it was also more divided between human and spiritual interests, and more dependent upon continued Avatar intervention to maintain the delicate balances that her choices had created rather than resolved. Her successors inheriting both the benefits and the burdens of her pragmatic approach to cosmic responsibility, and the eternal challenge of serving all worlds while belonging fully to none. The peaceful world that Avatar Kuruk inherited from his predecessor seemed to mock the very notion that cosmic balance required constant vigilance, its prosperity and harmony, creating an illusion of permanence that encouraged complacency among both spiritual practitioners and ordinary citizens who had grown accustomed to safety and stability that they assumed would continue indefinitely without the kind of active intervention and sacrifice that had characterized earlier periods when Avatar power was more obviously necessary for preventing disasters and resolving conflicts that threatened the foundations of civilization itself. The Southern Water Tribe of Kuruk's youth represented the pinnacle of cultural achievement for his people, their ice cities gleaming beneath aurora-painted skies, while their hunters ranged across vast territories where game was plentiful and the spirits seemed benevolent toward human activities that had once required careful negotiation and constant attention to maintaining proper relationships with entities whose cooperation was essential for survival in environments that could become hostile without warning when protocols were violated or respect was inadequately demonstrated. The festivals and celebrations that filled Kuruk's early years as Avatar reflected a world where spiritual traditions had become comfortable routines rather than vital necessities, their ancient rituals performed with precision and beauty, but lacking the desperate intensity that had characterized similar ceremonies during periods when failure to properly honor spiritual obligations could result in catastrophic consequences for entire communities whose survival depended upon maintaining favor with forces beyond human understanding or control. The training that Kuruk received in elemental mastery was comprehensive and thorough, but conducted in an atmosphere of academic study rather than urgent preparation for cosmic responsibilities that seemed remote and theoretical in a world where serious threats to global balance appeared to be historical curiosities rather than ongoing concerns that required constant readiness and the kind of personal sacrifice that previous avatars had accepted as inevitable consequences of their unique role in maintaining harmony between realms whose interests often conflicted in ways that demanded difficult choices and painful compromises. The mastery of the avatar state that Kuruk achieved during his peaceful adolescence was remarkable for its technical perfection and spiritual integration, yet it lacked the battle-tested reliability that could only come through exposure to genuine crisis situations where failure meant not just personal defeat, but catastrophic consequences for innocent people whose safety depended upon avatar intervention at moments when alternatives had been exhausted and conventional solutions had proven inadequate for addressing threats that transcended normal categories of challenge or opposition. The romantic relationship that developed between Kuruk and Umi embodied everything beautiful and hopeful about their generation's experience of life. In a world where love could flourish without the constant threat of separation through war or disaster, their courtship unfolding with the leisurely grace of people who expected to have unlimited time together and who could afford to make plans that extended decades into a future that seemed secure and predictable based on the stability that had characterized their entire lives up to that point. Umi's gentle strength and quiet wisdom complemented Kuruk's more outgoing personality perfectly. Her ability to see through surface appearances to underlying truths, providing balance for his tendency toward optimism that sometimes prevented him from recognizing problems that required attention before they grew into crises. Their partnership, creating the kind of mutual support and understanding that enabled both individuals to become more than they could have achieved through solitary effort, while maintaining their distinct identities and personal goals. The wedding ceremony that united Kuruk and Umi was celebrated throughout the water tribes with festivities that reflected their people's joy in witnessing the Avatar find personal happiness that seemed to validate the peaceful world their generation had inherited. The elaborate rituals and generous gift-giving, demonstrating community investment in relationships that represented hope for continued prosperity, and the kind of stable leadership that could maintain existing conditions rather than requiring the dramatic interventions and revolutionary changes that had characterized earlier Avatar careers. The early years of their marriage were filled with the simple pleasures of domestic life and shared adventures that took them throughout the Water Tribe territories and beyond, their travels providing opportunities for Kuruk to maintain ceremonial contact with spiritual sites and traditional obligations while experiencing the world as tourist rather than cosmic guardian, their journeys creating memories of beauty and discovery that would sustain him through darker periods when such innocent joy became impossible to recapture or maintain. The first signs of spiritual disturbance began subtly enough that they could be dismissed as isolated incidents rather than indicators of systematic problems that required Avatar attention. Reports of strange behavior among normally peaceful spirits and unusual phenomena at sacred sites, seeming like minor curiosities rather than warnings about developing threats that would eventually require responses that no training or preparation could have adequately prepared any individual to provide effectively. The dark spirits that were beginning to manifest in remote regions of the spirit world operated according to principles that violated every assumption about spiritual behavior that Kuruk's education had established as fundamental truths, their malevolent intelligence and destructive capabilities representing something new and terrible. In the cosmic order that had maintained relative stability since one's time, their emergence suggesting that forces beyond normal comprehension were working to destabilize the careful balances that had enabled both worlds to coexist peacefully for millennia. The investigation that Kuruk began into these disturbing reports required him to venture into areas of the spirit world that had been considered too dangerous for casual exploration, even during previous eras when Avatar powers were more kaya, regularly employed for maintaining relationships with spiritual entities, his journeys taking him through landscapes where the normal laws of physics and logic held no sway, and where consciousness itself could be threatened by exposure to influences that operated according to malevolent purposes rather than natural principles. The battles that Kuruk fought in the spirit world were unlike anything described in Avatar training manuals or historical accounts, his opponents possessing abilities that seemed designed specifically to counter traditional bending techniques, while exploiting psychological vulnerabilities that could transform strengths into weaknesses through methods that attacked identity and memory rather than merely threatening physical existence, their tactics requiring defensive strategies that no previous Avatar had needed to develop or master. The isolation that these secret conflicts imposed upon Kuruk became increasingly difficult to bear as their frequency and intensity escalated beyond anything he could have anticipated when first responding to what had seemed like minor disturbances requiring routine avatar intervention. The necessity of concealing the true nature and scope of his activities, preventing him from seeking advice or assistance that might have enabled more effective responses to threats that seemed to grow stronger and more sophisticated with each encounter. Ummi's growing concern about her husband's frequent absences and obvious exhaustion reflected her intuitive understanding that something fundamental had changed in their relationship and in Kuruk's approach to his avatar, responsibilities, yet his inability to explain the true nature of his activities without revealing secrets that might endanger her safety or compromise his mission created barriers between them that threatened the emotional foundation upon which his Panbi psychological stability increasingly depended as other sources of support and meaning became unavailable due to the demands of his hidden war. The physical and spiritual toll that constant battles with dark spirits exacted from Kuruk's body and consciousness accumulated gradually but relentlessly, each victory coming at costs that could not be fully recovered before the next crisis required intervention that pushed his capabilities further beyond their natural limits, the avatar state becoming less a source of enhanced power than a necessary survival mechanism that enabled him to continue functioning, despite damage that would have permanently disabled anyone lacking access to cosmic energies. Ko, the Face Stealer's involvement in the escalating spiritual crisis represented the most personal and terrifying challenge that Kuruk would face during his brief but intense career as Avatar. The ancient spirit's obsession with collecting identities and memories, making him particularly dangerous to someone whose sense of self was already being eroded by constant exposure to forces that attacked the fundamental structures of consciousness and personal identity through methods that conventional defenses could not adequately counter or prevent. The encounter with Ko that would ultimately cost Ummi her face occurred during what Kuruk believed would be a routine investigation of spiritual disturbances that had been reported in regions near Water Tribe territory. His confidence in his ability to handle whatever threat he discovered, leading him to approach the situation with less caution than previous experiences, should have taught him was necessary when dealing with entities whose malevolence exceeded normal categories of spiritual hostility or opposition. The trap that Ko had prepared was designed specifically to exploit Kuruk's emotional attachments and his tendency to prioritize immediate threats over long-term strategic considerations. The Face Stealer's intimate knowledge of avatar psychology, enabling him to create scenarios where heroic instincts and protective impulses would lead to exactly the kind of tactical mistakes that would provide opportunities for the passing kind of devastating attack that could accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously while appearing to offer chances for successful intervention and rescue. The moment when Kuruk realized that his attempts to save other victims of Ko's predations had provided the Face Stealer with access to Ummi represented the complete failure of everything he had believed about his ability to protect the people he loved while fulfilling his cosmic responsibilities. The discovery that his avatar powers and accumulated experience were inadequate to prevent the loss of the person whose love had provided meaning and motivation for all his sacrifices, creating psychological damage that no amount of spiritual healing could repair. Ummi's transformation from beloved wife into faceless victim embodied every avatar's worst fear about the costs that cosmic responsibility could exact from those who accepted the burden of maintaining balance between worlds, her condition serving as permanent reminder that no amount of power or wisdom could guarantee the safety of innocent people who became targets because of their relationships with individuals whose very existence made them lightning rods. for forces that sought to cause maximum suffering through carefully calculated attacks on emotional vulnerabilities. The desperate attempts that Kuruk made to restore Umi's stolen identity consumed increasingly large portions of his time and energy, while producing no meaningful progress toward reversal of damage that Ko's ancient malice had, inflicted through methods that seemed designed to be irreversible by any power available to Avatar consciousness. Each failed effort adding to his growing understanding that some losses could not be undone through determination or sacrifice, that some wounds could not heal, regardless of the resources applied to their treatment. The gradual breakdown of Kuruk's psychological stability following Umi's tragedy was accelerated by his continued obligation to battle dark spirits whose activities threatened other innocent victims. The knowledge that his failures could result in suffering similar to what his wife had endured, creating pressure that made every decision feel like potential betrayal of either cosmic duty or personal loyalty. The impossible balance between competing obligations gradually eroding his ability to function effectively in either role. The drinking that began as temporary escape from unbearable emotional pain evolved into systematic self-destruction that reflected Kuruk's growing belief that his continued existence caused more harm than good. His awareness that Avatar reincarnation would eventually provide the world with a successor who might succeed where he had failed, creating perverse incentive to accelerate the process through behaviors that would shorten his natural lifespan while temporarily dulling the psychological agony that sobriety made impossible to endure. The friends and family members who tried to intervene in Kuruk's downward spiral were handicapped by their lack of understanding about the true nature of his burden and the specific traumas that had transformed him from confident hero into broken man whose public failures reflected private devastation that he could not explain without revealing secrets that might endanger others or compromise ongoing efforts to contain threats that continue to emerge despite his diminished effectiveness as Avatar Guardian. The final battles that Kuruk fought against dark spirits were characterized more by desperate fury than strategic thinking, his attacks motivated by rage and grief, rather than the careful planning and spiritual balance that had previously enabled him to achieve victory through harmony between human determination and cosmic power, his techniques becoming increasingly reckless and destructive as his focus shifted from protecting the world to punishing the forces that had destroyed everything he valued most deeply. The spiritual damage that accumulated through these final confrontations created irreversible harm to Kuruk's connection with the Avatar state and his ability to access the accumulated wisdom of previous incarnations. His consciousness becoming increasingly isolated from the sources of guidance and strength that had enabled earlier avatars to maintain their sanity and effectiveness, despite facing comparable challenges and similar pressures that tested every aspect of character and spiritual development. The death that claimed Kuruk at the tragically young age of 33 was both merciful release and cosmic tragedy, ending suffering that had become unbearable while depriving the world of Avatar protection during a period when dark spiritual forces remained active and dangerous, his sacrifice having contained rather than eliminated threats that would continue to pose challenges for his successors, who would inherit both his unfinished battles and the psychological scars that his experiences had revealed as inevitable consequences of Avatar responsibility. The legacy that Kuruk left for future avatars included hard-won knowledge about spiritual warfare and the personal costs that cosmic duty could exact from those who accepted ultimate responsibility for maintaining balance between worlds whose conflicts often required solutions that came at prices that no individual should be expected to pay alone. his tragic example serving as both warning and inspiration for those who would follow in his footsteps while facing their own unique challenges and impossible choices. The reincarnation cycle that followed Kuruk's death would carry forward not just his accumulated wisdom about battling dark spirits, but also his painful understanding that avatar power alone was insufficient to prevent all suffering or protect all innocent people from harm. That cosmic responsibility required acceptance of limitations and losses that challenged every assumption about justice, and the possibility of achieving perfect balance in an imperfect world where competing values and irreconcilable interests made tragic choices inevitable. The world that welcomed Avatar Kyoshi's birth bore little resemblance to the harmonious realm that previous avatars had known. Its political landscape fractured by centuries of neglect and institutional decay that had allowed corruption and lawlessness to flourish in regions where central authority had weakened or disappeared entirely, leaving countless communities vulnerable to exploitation by warlords and criminal organizations, whose power grew unchecked in the absence of effective governance or spiritual guidance that could restore order through legitimate means, rather than simple application of superior force. The Yokoya Peninsula, where Kyoshi spent her earliest years, exemplified the kind of forgotten corner of the Earth Kingdom, where poverty and isolation had created conditions that made survival a daily struggle for people whose ancestors had once enjoyed prosperity and security under previous dynasties. The small fishing village of her birth offering few opportunities for advancement or education beyond the basic skills needed to extract meager sustenance from waters that seemed to grow less generous with each passing season as larger forces beyond local control influenced weather patterns and fish migration routes. The discovery of Kyoshi's avatar status came not through the traditional ritual of toy selection that had identified previous incarnations, but through desperate circumstances that forced her latent abilities to manifest in ways that could not be ignored or misinterpreted. Her earthbending emerging during a moment of mortal peril when conventional solutions had proven inadequate and only cosmic intervention could prevent tragedy that would have claimed not just her individual life but the lives of innocent people whose only crime was being present when forces beyond their understanding converged in violent confrontation. The flying opera company that became Kyoshi's unlikely family and training ground operated outside the boundaries of conventional society and respectable behavior, their members united not by shared cultural background or philosophical agreement, but by common experience of rejection and marginalization that had driven them to seek alternative forms of community and purpose beyond the reach of authorities who viewed their activities with suspicion and their very existence as threat to established order and traditional values. Jianzhu's role in Kyoshi's education represented the complex relationship between individual avatar development and the political interests of established institutions that sought to shape cosmic power according to their own priorities and objectives, his methods combining genuine care for her growth with manipulation designed to ensure that her abilities would serve purposes that he considered beneficial, regardless of whether those goals aligned with her personal values or independent judgment about how avatar power should be applied to contemporary challenges. The revelation of Yun's false avatar status and his subsequent transformation into vengeful adversary demonstrated how easily spiritual authority could be corrupted when combined with personal trauma and institutional betrayal. His descent from promising candidate into dangerous enemy, illustrating the psychological dangers that accompanied exposure to cosmic forces, without adequate spiritual preparation or emotional support from communities capable of providing the kind of guidance that prevented power from becoming an Antius, instrument of personal revenge rather than universal service. The political chaos that characterized the Earth Kingdom during Kyoshi's time reflected the accumulated consequences of decades of weak leadership and systematic corruption that had undermined public trust in governmental institutions, while enabling the emergence of competing power centers whose interests often conflicted with each other and with the welfare of ordinary citizens, who found themselves caught between rival factions that claimed legitimacy while demonstrating little concern for the people they supposedly served. Qin the Conqueror's rise to power embodied the kind of authoritarian response that charismatic leaders often provided to societies experiencing institutional breakdown and social disorder. His promise to restore order and stability through decisive action, appealing to populations exhausted by uncertainty and violence, while his methods revealed the dangerous potential for well-intentioned reforms to evolve into tyrannical systems that served their creators' ambitions more than their stated objectives of promoting general welfare and social harmony. The military campaigns that Qin conducted throughout the Earth Kingdom demonstrated both his genuine organizational abilities and his growing disconnection from the humanitarian principles that had initially motivated his efforts to restore effective governance. His victories creating momentum that encouraged increasingly ambitious goals, while his methods became progressively more brutal and less concerned with the welfare of populations that his forces conquered in the name of unification and administrative efficiency. The confrontation between Avatar and Conqueror that culminated in the creation of Kyoshi Island represented one of the most dramatic displays of Avatar power in recorded history. The geological forces that Kyoshi unleashed to separate the peninsula from the mainland, demonstrating capabilities that exceeded anything previously documented, while establishing precedents for the kind of decisive action that would characterize her approach to resolving conflicts that threatened innocent lives or fundamental principles of justice and human dignity. The Kyoshi warriors who emerged from the Avatar's example and teachings represented a new model for how martial arts and spiritual discipline could be combined with community service and social responsibility. Their training, emphasizing not just individual combat effectiveness, but collective action and mutual support that enabled ordinary people to protect themselves and their neighbors from threats that traditional authority structures had proven incapable of addressing through conventional methods or established protocols. The relationship between Kyoshi and Rangi transcended the typical boundaries between avatar and companion to encompass emotional intimacy and spiritual partnership that provided both individuals with sources of strength and motivation, enabled them to face challenges and make sacrifices that would have been impossible without the foundation of love and trust that connected their lives across decades of shared adventures and mutual devotion that sustained them through periods of doubt and difficulty. The longevity that distinguished Kyoshi from all other avatars in recorded history was not merely biological anomaly, but reflection of her unique relationship with cosmic forces that enabled her to maintain physical vitality and spiritual connection across more than 2 centuries of active service. Her extended lifespan, allowing her to witness the long-term consequences of her decisions while providing opportunities to refine her understanding of how avatar power could be most effectively applied to promote lasting positive change. The administrative reforms that Kyoshi implemented throughout the Earth Kingdom during her unprecedented tenure as Avatar reflected her growing understanding that military victory and dramatic interventions were insufficient to create stable institutions and just societies. Her later years focused increasingly on the patient work of building governmental systems and cultural traditions that could maintain order and prosperity without requiring constant avatar intervention or the threat of cosmic retaliation against those who violated established principles. The Dai Li organization that Kyoshi founded to maintain security in Ba Sing Se was conceived as solution to the practical problem of governing a city whose size and complexity exceeded the capacity of conventional law enforcement methods. Her vision of elite earthbenders dedicated to protecting citizens and preserving order, reflecting her belief that specialized training and institutional loyalty could create forces for good that would continue functioning effectively long after her own death ended her direct oversight and guidance. The philosophical evolution that characterized Kyoshi's thinking across her extended lifetime moved from initial emphasis on decisive action and immediate justice toward more nuanced understanding of how complex problems required patient solutions that addressed underlying causes rather than merely treating visible symptoms. Her mature wisdom, incorporating lessons learned through decades of experience that had taught her the limitations as well as the potential of avatar power when applied to human institutions and social challenges. The training methods that Kyoshi developed for teaching earthbending and avatar techniques emphasized practical application and real-world effectiveness rather than theoretical understanding or traditional forms that had been preserved primarily for their historical significance. Her approach reflecting her belief that martial arts and spiritual disciplines should serve contemporary needs rather than becoming museum pieces that honored the past, without addressing present challenges or future requirements. The Earth Kingdom's territorial expansion and internal development that occurred during Kyoshi's reign created unprecedented prosperity and cultural achievement that demonstrated what could be accomplished when effective leadership combined with stable institutions to create conditions where human potential could flourish without the constant threat of war or the disruption of social order by criminal organizations or corrupt officials whose activities had previously diverted resources and energy from productive purposes. The artistic and intellectual flowering that accompanied political stability during Kyoshi's era produced literature, philosophy, and scientific advances that enriched human understanding while creating cultural treasures that would influence future generations. The creators of these works benefiting from the peace and security that avatar protection provided, while contributing to the kind of civilization that justified the sacrifices and difficult decisions that maintaining such conditions required from those who accepted responsibility for cosmic balance. The international relationships that Kyoshi managed during her tenure required diplomatic skills that complemented her reputation for decisive action. Her negotiations with other nations, demonstrating that avatar authority could be exercised through patient persuasion and mutual accommodation as effectively as through demonstrations of superior power. Her success in maintaining peaceful relations while protecting Earth Kingdom interests, providing models for future avatars who would face similar challenges in balancing national loyalty with cosmic responsibility. The spirit world connections that Kyoshi maintained throughout her extended lifetime enabled her to access resources and perspectives that informed her decision-making while providing spiritual grounding that prevented her from becoming corrupted by the temporal power that her position provided. Her regular communion with cosmic forces, serving as reminder that avatar authority derived from service to universal principles rather than personal ambition, or cultural prejudice that might distort judgment about what actions truly served the greater good. The legacy institutions that Kyoshi established during her final decades were designed to preserve the achievements of her reign while providing mechanisms for continued progress and adaptation that could serve future generations without recurring avatar intervention. Her understanding that even extended lifespans eventually end motivating her to create structures that could maintain stability and promote justice through human agency, rather than depending entirely upon cosmic power that might not always be available when needed most urgently. The training that Kyoshi provided for her successor focused not just on elemental techniques and spiritual practices, but on the political wisdom and administrative knowledge that effective avatar service required in complex societies where cosmic responsibility intersected with governmental functions and international relations. Her comprehensive approach to avatar education, reflecting lessons learned through 2 centuries of experience that had taught her the full scope of challenges that future incarnations would face. The death that finally claimed Kyoshi after 230 years of service came peacefully in her sleep, her transition from mortal existence to spiritual continuation occurring without the trauma or violence that had characterized the deaths of several previous avatars, her natural passing, providing closure to an extraordinary lifetime, while enabling the reincarnation cycle to continue without the complications that sudden or premature avatar death sometimes created for spiritual continuity and cosmic balance. The immediate impact of Kyoshi's death was felt throughout the Earth Kingdom and beyond. Her passing, marking the end of an era that had been defined by her presence and policies for longer than most institutions or cultural traditions had existed. The stability that she had created, requiring careful management during the transition period before her successor could be identified and trained to assume responsibilities that had grown increasingly complex during her extended tenure as Cosmic Guardian. The reincarnation process that followed Kyoshi's death carried forward not just her spiritual essence and accumulated wisdom, but also the institutional knowledge and practical experience that she had gained through direct involvement in governance and administration. Her successor, inheriting both the benefits and the burdens of the systems and relationships that she had created while having to adapt these legacies to new circumstances and different challenges that would require fresh approaches while building upon foundations that her extraordinary lifetime had established. The world that emerged from Kyoshi's influence bore the permanent mark of her decisive action and patient institution building. The Earth Kingdom she left behind, demonstrating what could be accomplished when avatar power was applied consistently and wisely over extended periods, rather than being limited to crisis intervention and dramatic but temporary solutions. Her example, providing both inspiration and caution for future avatars who would measure their own achievements against the standard of service and effectiveness that her unprecedented lifetime had established for cosmic guardianship. The Fire Nation that welcomed Avatar Roku's birth represented the pinnacle of prosperity and cultural achievement that the island civilization had attained through centuries of careful development and wise governance, its cities gleaming with architectural marvels that demonstrated how firebending could be applied to constructive purposes, while its people enjoyed levels of education and artistic expression that had become the envy of other nations whose own achievements seemed modest by comparison to the innovations and refinements that characterized Fire Nation society during this golden age of peace and international cooperation. Prince Sozin's friendship with the young Avatar began during their shared education at the Fire Nation's most prestigious academy, where children of noble families learned not just the technical skills of governance and military leadership, but the philosophical principles that were supposed to guide their exercise of power in service of their people's welfare and the maintenance of harmonious relationships with neighboring nations whose own prosperity contributed to the stability and security that enabled continued cultural and economic development throughout the known world. The bond that developed between Roku and Sozin transcended the typical relationships between royal princes and their companions. Their intellectual compatibility and shared vision of what the Fire Nation could accomplish through enlightened leadership, creating partnership that seemed destined to usher in an era of unprecedented progress and international cooperation. Their combined talents and complementary personalities suggesting possibilities for advancement that neither could achieve independently, while their friendship provided emotional foundation for the kinds of ambitious projects that would require sustained collaboration and mutual trust. The early years of their association were marked by adventures and explorations that took them throughout the Fire Nation and beyond, their travels providing opportunities to observe how different communities addressed common challenges, while exposing them to diverse approaches to governance and social organization that broadened their understanding of human potential and the various methods through which societies could promote individual flourishing while maintaining collective stability and security that protected vulnerable members from exploitation or abandonment. The education that prepared Roku for his avatar responsibilities began with traditional Fire Nation instruction in philosophy, history, and martial arts that provided foundational knowledge about his own culture and its relationship to the broader world. Yet his training soon expanded to encompass the comprehensive study of all four elements and the nations that had developed mastery over these fundamental forces. His tutors, understanding that avatar effectiveness required deep appreciation for the diversity of human experience and the various paths that different peoples had discovered for achieving wisdom and maintaining social harmony. The journey to the Southern Air Temple that marked the beginning of Roku's formal avatar training represented his first extended separation from familiar surroundings and comfortable routines. The mountain sanctuary's emphasis on spiritual development and detachment from worldly concerns, challenging his Fire Nation upbringing, while providing access to meditation techniques and philosophical frameworks that would prove essential for managing the psychological pressures and moral complexities that accompanied cosmic responsibility for maintaining balance between competing interests and irreconcilable values. The airbending instruction that Roku received from Monk Gyatso emphasized not just the technical aspects of manipulating air currents, but the spiritual principles that made such abilities possible. The ancient master's teaching methods, revealing how elemental bending required harmony between consciousness and natural forces, rather than simple application of willpower or physical technique, his lessons providing insights into the interconnectedness of all existence that would influence Roku's approach to avatar duties throughout his lifetime, while establishing perspectives that transcended narrow cultural prejudices or nationalist loyalties. The years spent mastering air's flowing movements and evasive strategies taught Roku patience and flexibility that complemented his natural Fire Nation inclinations toward decisive action and direct confrontation. The integration of seemingly contradictory approaches, creating versatility that would enable him to address diverse challenges through methods appropriate to specific circumstances, rather than applying uniform solutions that might prove inadequate when dealing with problems that required sensitivity to cultural differences or accommodation of competing legitimate interests that could not be reconciled through simple assertion of avatar authority. The waterbending training that followed took Roku to the Northern Water Tribe's ice palaces, where master practitioners demonstrated how their elements' fluid, nature, and adaptive properties could be channeled for healing and defense as well as combat applications. Their techniques revealing philosophical approaches to conflict resolution that emphasized redirection and neutralization of hostile forces. Rather than meeting aggression with equal violence, their wisdom providing alternative models for how power could be exercised in service of protection and restoration rather than domination and destruction. The healing arts that waterbending masters taught provided Roku with skills that would prove as valuable as any combat technique throughout his avatar career. His ability to treat physical injuries and spiritual ailments, enabling him to serve communities in ways that went beyond preventing disasters or resolving conflicts, to encompass the patient work of restoration and recovery that helped people rebuild their lives after experiencing trauma or loss that conventional solutions could not address adequately through political or economic interventions alone. The earthbending instruction that completed Roku's elemental education took place in the vast training grounds of Jiaoling, where Earth Kingdom masters demonstrated how their element's stability and strength could be applied to both defensive and creative purposes, their teachings emphasizing the importance of solid foundations and persistent effort in accomplishing goals that required sustained commitment over extended periods, their philosophy providing balance for the more fluid and adaptive approaches that he had learned from air and water practitioners. The avatar state training that represented the culmination of Roku's preparation required him to learn how to access and channel the combined wisdom and power of all his previous incarnations without being overwhelmed by experiences and memories that spanned millennia of cosmic service. The techniques that enabled such integration demanding spiritual maturity and emotional stability that could only be developed through years of meditation and self-examination that revealed the limitations of individual perspective, while providing access to universal truths that transcended cultural conditioning and personal prejudice. The return to the Fire Nation that concluded Roku's formal training period brought him back to a homeland that had continued developing and changing during his absence. Sozin's assumption of greater responsibility within the royal hierarchy, having accelerated certain policy initiatives and cultural shifts that reflected his growing confidence in his vision for Fire Nation greatness and his Fire Nation greatness, nation's potential role in guiding global civilization toward higher levels of achievement and international cooperation that could benefit everyone, while establishing Fire Nation leadership in areas where their advanced technology and administrative expertise could serve universal interests. The early years of Roku's avatar service were characterized by the kind of routine responsibilities and minor interventions that suggested the world had achieved the stable balance that previous avatars had worked to establish, his activities focusing primarily on ceremonial duties and diplomatic functions that maintained traditional relationships while providing spiritual guidance for communities facing the kinds of ordinary challenges that competent local leadership could usually address without requiring cosmic intervention or the application of avatar powers that seemed increasingly unnecessary in a world where most problems could be solved through conventional means. The friendship between Avatar and Fire Lord that continued throughout this peaceful period provided both individuals with emotional support and intellectual stimulation that enriched their personal lives while creating opportunities for informal consultation and collaboration on issues that affected both their individual responsibilities and their shared interest in promoting prosperity and stability throughout the world. Their regular communication, ensuring that Avatar perspectives informed Fire Nation policy, while Fire Nation innovations and resources supported Avatar initiatives that served broader international interests. The gradual shift in Sozin's thinking about Fire Nation destiny and global responsibility began subtly through philosophical discussions and policy proposals that seemed reasonable extensions of existing practices rather than radical departures from traditional approaches to international relations. His arguments about sharing Fire Nation prosperity and technological advances with less developed regions, reflecting genuine concern for human welfare, while also serving national interests that would benefit from expanded influence and Fire Nation access to resources that such benevolent expansion could provide through voluntary cooperation rather than conquest or coercion. The industrial innovations that characterized Sozin's reign created unprecedented prosperity and technological capabilities that transformed Fire Nation society, while providing resources that could support ambitious projects and paved international initiatives on scales that previous generations could never have contemplated. The factories and workshops that emerged throughout the islands, demonstrating how firebending could be applied to manufacturing and engineering purposes that created wealth and employment while producing goods and services that improved living conditions for ordinary citizens and enhanced Fire Nation prestige throughout the known world. The military developments that accompanied these industrial advances reflected Sozin's growing belief that Fire Nation's superiority in technology and organization created both opportunities and obligations that required more assertive foreign policy approaches. His arguments about preventing conflicts through demonstrations of strength and his proposals for protective interventions in regions experiencing instability, revealing how easily humanitarian concerns could be used to justify actions that served primarily nationalist objectives rather than genuine international welfare or cosmic balance. The philosophical debates between Avatar and Fire Lord that became increasingly frequent and intense during this period revealed fundamental differences in their understanding of progress and civilization that had been obscured by their personal affection and shared cultural background. Roku's cosmic perspective, emphasizing balance and mutual respect between different approaches to human development, while Sozin's nationalist vision prioritized efficiency and advancement that could be achieved more rapidly through unified direction rather than the slower processes of consensus building and cultural accommodation that Avatar philosophy traditionally favored. The crisis point that ultimately ended their friendship arrived when Sozin's policies crossed the line from benevolent expansion to aggressive colonization that violated other nations' sovereignty while demonstrating disregard for the cultural diversity and political independence that Avatar responsibility required him to protect. Roku's confrontation with his oldest friend, representing one of the most painful personal conflicts in Avatar history, while establishing precedents for how cosmic duty must take precedence over individual loyalty when fundamental principles were at stake. The display of Avatar power that Roku unleashed during their final confrontation was intended primarily as demonstration and warning, rather than attempt at permanent resolution. His destruction of the Fire Nation Palace's throne room, showing Sozin the catastrophic consequences that would follow if his aggressive policies continued, while providing opportunity for reconsideration and voluntary correction that could preserve their friendship and prevent the escalation of conflicts that would inevitably result from continued Fire Nation expansion at other nations' expense. Sozin's apparent acceptance of Roku's ultimatum and his public commitment to abandoning colonial ambitions seemed to resolve their dispute, while preserving the personal relationship that both men valued despite their political disagreements. The Fire Lord's diplomatic skill in managing the immediate crisis, obscuring his private determination to continue pursuing his vision through methods that would avoid direct confrontation with Avatar authority, while achieving the same objectives through more subtle and patient approaches that could accomplish his goals without triggering the kind of intervention that had forced him to retreat from his initial strategy. The decades of apparent peace that followed this confrontation allowed Roku to focus on other Avatar responsibilities throughout the world, while maintaining ceremonial contact with Fire Nation leadership through state visits and formal communications that suggested continued cooperation and mutual respect. The surface harmony, obscuring Sozin's careful preparation for renewed expansion that would be conducted through methods designed to present Avatar opponents with accomplished facts rather than advance warnings that could trigger preventive intervention before irreversible changes had been implemented. The volcanic eruption that ultimately claimed Roku's life represented the kind of natural disaster that had always been part of Avatar responsibility. His response to the crisis, demonstrating both his commitment to protecting innocent lives regardless of political considerations, and the limitations that even cosmic power faced when confronting natural forces that operated according to geological rather than spiritual principles, the emergency requiring immediate action rather than the careful planning and strategic thinking that might have enabled him to anticipate and counter the political implications of his temporary vulnerability. Sozin's assistance during the initial stages of the rescue operation seemed to confirm that their friendship had survived political disagreements, while his willingness to risk his own safety to help with evacuation efforts suggested genuine concern for human welfare that transcended nationalist calculations. The Fire Lord's presence providing hope that their cooperation could continue despite previous conflicts, while creating opportunities for renewed partnership in addressing challenges that required both Avatar power and Fire Nation resources to resolve effectively. The moment of betrayal that ended both Roku's life and any possibility of preventing the catastrophic war that would follow came when Sozin recognized that the Avatar's death would eliminate the primary obstacle to his imperial ambitions while creating the power vacuum that would enable Fire Nation expansion to proceed without the intervention that had previously forced him to abandon his colonial policies. His decision to withdraw assistance and allow natural forces to complete what political opposition had been unable to accomplish, representing the ultimate corruption of friendship by nationalist ideology. The spiritual connection that Roku maintained with future avatars through the reincarnation cycle enabled him to provide guidance and warnings that partially compensated for his failure to prevent the war that his death had made possible. His communications with Avatar Aang, revealing both the wisdom gained through decades of experience and the regret that came from understanding how different choices might have prevented the suffering that his merciful approach to friendship and diplomacy had inadvertently enabled through excessive trust in personal relationships over institutional safeguards and systematic monitoring. The legacy that Roku left for his successors included both positive examples of Avatar service and painful lessons about the dangers of allowing personal sentiment to override cosmic responsibility when dealing with individuals whose ambitions threatened global stability. His life demonstrating both the importance of maintaining relationships across cultural boundaries and the necessity of recognizing when such connections had become obstacles to effective Avatar action, rather than resources that could be used to promote peace and mutual understanding between competing interests and incompatible visions of human progress. The world that inherited the consequences of Roku's death and Sozin's betrayal would spend the next century learning the costs that came from Avatar failure to prevent conflicts before they escalated beyond the reach of diplomatic solutions or individual intervention. The 100-Year War that followed serving as testament to both the importance of Avatar vigilance and the catastrophic results that could follow when cosmic guardianship was interrupted during periods when balance between nations remained precarious and dependent upon continued spiritual oversight, rather than stable institutions and shared values that could maintain peace without requiring constant Avatar presence and intervention. The systematic campaign of genocide that Fire Lord Sozin launched against the air nomads in the hours following Avatar Roku's death represented the most comprehensive and devastating assault upon human civilization that the world had ever witnessed. Its scope and brutality designed not merely to eliminate potential military resistance, but to erase an entire culture from existence, while demonstrating Fire Nation power in ways that would terrorize other nations into submission rather than encouraging them to organize effective opposition to imperial expansion that could no longer be prevented through diplomatic intervention or Avatar authority. The comet that blazed across the sky during those terrible first days of war provided Fire Nation forces with enhanced abilities that enabled destruction on scales that normal firebending could never have achieved. Their attacks consuming temples and monasteries that had stood for millennia, while their flames reached temperatures that reduced stone and metal to ash, along with the irreplaceable manuscripts and artifacts that contained centuries of accumulated wisdom about spiritual practices and philosophical insights that would never again be available to guide future generations seeking understanding of humanity's relationship with cosmic forces. The air nomads' philosophical commitment to pacifism and their cultural emphasis on avoiding harm to all living beings left them tragically unprepared for the kind of coordinated military assault that Sozin's forces unleashed upon their communities, their training in defensive techniques and evasive maneuvers proving inadequate against opponents who showed no restraint or mercy, while employing tactics specifically designed to counter airbending advantages through overwhelming numbers and sustained attacks that prevented escape or effective resistance by populations whose entire worldview had been built around assumptions of basic human decency. The flying bison, who had served as companions and partners to generations of air nomads, became primary targets for Fire Nation hunters, who understood that eliminating these magnificent creatures would not only deprive airbenders of mobility and tactical advantages, but would also inflict psychological devastation upon people whose spiritual bonds with their animals transcended normal categories of friendship or utility. The systematic slaughter of these gentle giants, representing cultural genocide that attacked the very foundations of air nomad identity and spiritual practice. The temples themselves burned with fires that seemed to consume not just physical structures, but the memories and traditions that had made these places sacred repositories of human wisdom and spiritual achievement, their libraries and meditation halls becoming funeral pyres that destroyed irreplaceable knowledge, while their courtyards and gardens were transformed into battlefields where desperate defenders made final stands against overwhelming forces that showed no interest in preserving anything valuable from the civilization they were systematically destroying. Monk Gyatso's final battle in the Southern Air Temple's sanctuary demonstrated both the spiritual strength that air nomad training could develop and the ultimate futility of individual resistance against coordinated military campaigns designed to achieve complete elimination of targeted populations. His ability to overcome dozens of Fire Nation soldiers through airbending mastery, proving insufficient to prevent the broader catastrophe. while his death marked the end of wisdom traditions that had guided spiritual seekers for countless generations. The world that awakened to news of the air nomad's destruction found itself fundamentally altered by the realization that entire civilizations could be eliminated within days when sufficient military force was applied without calm, restraint, or moral limitation. The unprecedented nature of the genocide forcing other nations to reconsider their assumptions about international relations and the boundaries that had previously been respected, even during periods of conflict and territorial dispute that had seemed serious at the time, but now appeared trivial compared to existential threats. The Earth Kingdom's initial response to Fire Nation aggression reflected the institutional inertia and political fragmentation that had characterized their government for decades, their military commanders and civilian administrators struggling to coordinate effective resistance, while their traditional emphasis on defensive strategies and territorial preservation left them unprepared for the kind of sustained, offensive campaigns that would be required to counter Fire Nation expansion before it could establish permanent footholds in occupied territories. Ba Sing Se's transformation from cosmopolitan capital into fortress city demonstrated how prolonged warfare could alter the character of entire civilizations. The Great Walls that had once represented architectural achievement and cultural pride becoming symbols of isolation and fear, while the city's internal policies grew increasingly authoritarian as authorities sought to maintain order and morale through information control and suppression of dissent that might undermine defensive efforts or encourage defeatist attitudes among populations whose survival depended upon continued resistance. The Daili's evolution from Kyoshi's idealistic vision of elite protectors into instruments of political control and social manipulation revealed how even institutions founded with noble purposes could be corrupted when external pressures and internal fears created incentives for expanding authority beyond original mandates. Their techniques for managing information and suppressing opposition eventually becoming more sophisticated and pervasive than the threats they had been created to counter through legitimate means. The Water Tribe's isolation at the world's polar extremes initially provided some protection from Fire Nation expansion, yet their scattered populations and limited industrial capacity made them vulnerable to raids and systematic campaigns designed to eliminate waterbending capabilities through capture or elimination of practitioners whose abilities might be used against Fire Nation forces. The gradual reduction of their communities through decades of targeted attacks, creating desperation that forced survivors into hiding while their cultural traditions were disrupted by constant threat and frequent displacement. The Southern Water Tribe's particular suffering under Fire Nation, raids that specifically targeted women and girls, reflected the tactical intelligence that guided enemy strategy, their forces understanding that eliminating waterbending practitioners would cripple the tribe's defensive capabilities while creating psychological trauma that would undermine community cohesion and resistance efforts. The loss of healing abilities and cultural knowledge that women traditionally preserved, making each successful raid a victory that extended far beyond immediate military objectives. The underground resistance networks that emerged throughout occupied territories demonstrated human resilience and adaptability in the face of overwhelming oppression, their members developing communication systems and operational procedures that enabled coordination of sabotage and intelligence gathering activities while maintaining security that protected participants from detection and retaliation by occupying forces whose brutal responses to discovered resistance made capture equivalent to death sentence for anyone caught engaging in activities that threatened Fire Nation control. The White Lotus Society's transformation from scholarly organization into clandestine resistance network reflected how intellectual and spiritual communities adapted to circumstances that threatened not just political independence, but the preservation of knowledge and wisdom traditions that would be essential for eventual reconstruction of civilization after military conflicts ended, their members using established contacts and shared interests to create support systems that transcended national boundaries and political affiliations. The environmental destruction that accompanied a century of industrialized warfare altered landscapes and ecosystems throughout the known world. Fire Nation military doctrine, emphasizing total destruction of resources that might support enemy populations, while their industrial capacity enabled production of weapons and equipment on scales that previous conflicts had never required. The accumulated damage from decades of such practices creating problems that would persist long after political settlements had been reached. The forests that were burned to deny shelter and resources to resistance fighters represented losses that could not be restored within human lifetimes, their destruction eliminating habitats for countless species, while disrupting weather patterns and agricultural systems that had supported communities for generations. The ecological consequences of military strategy, creating secondary effects that multiplied human suffering through famine and displacement, that continued long after active combat operations had moved to other regions. The cultural preservation efforts that occurred in hidden schools and secret gatherings throughout occupied territories demonstrated how people could maintain identity and tradition even under the most oppressive conditions. Their determination to pass essential knowledge to younger generations, creating chains of transmission that preserved languages, customs, and skills that would otherwise have been lost forever. Their sacrifices, ensuring that eventual liberation would find foundations upon which reconstruction could be built. The technological innovations that warfare accelerated included advances in metallurgy, engineering, and manufacturing that would have beneficial applications once military needs no longer consumed all available resources. Yet the priorities that drove such development created distortions in human knowledge and capability that emphasized destruction and control over healing and creation. The intellectual focus on weapons and fortifications, diverting attention from problems that peaceful societies might have addressed more effectively. The children who grew up knowing only war developed perspectives and expectations that differed fundamentally from previous generations who had experienced peace and stability. Their psychological adaptation to constant threat and uncertainty, creating personalities and social skills that would prove both advantageous and problematic when circumstances eventually changed. Their experiences, providing insights into human resilience, while also demonstrating how conflict could alter the basic character of entire populations across extended periods. The art and literature that emerged from wartime experiences reflected both the suffering and the heroism that characterized daily life. Under occupation and resistance, the creators of such works finding ways to express truths and preserve memories that official histories might suppress or distort. Their contributions, ensuring that future generations would have access to authentic accounts of what people endured and how they maintained hope during periods when victory seemed impossible. The spiritual practices that sustained communities through decades of hardship often adapted traditional forms to meet contemporary needs. Meditation and prayer techniques being modified to provide psychological resources for dealing with trauma and loss, while religious observances were restructured to accommodate security requirements and resource limitations that made conventional ceremonies impossible. The evolution of such practices, demonstrating how spiritual wisdom could remain relevant during the most challenging circumstances. Avatar Aang's return from the iceberg represented hope that many people had abandoned after generations of Avatar absence. Yet, His youthful appearance and apparent innocence created initial skepticism about his ability to address challenges that had defeated experienced leaders and seasoned warriors throughout the previous century. The expectations that his presence generated, creating pressures that threatened to overwhelm someone whose last memories were of a peaceful world that no longer existed in any recognizable form. The training that Aang required to master all 4 elements within the compressed time frame that approaching deadlines demanded pushed both student and teachers beyond normal limitations. Their methods, combining traditional techniques with innovations necessitated by circumstances that had never been contemplated when such educational systems were originally designed. The urgency of preparation creating intensity that enabled rapid learning, while also risking psychological damage from exposure to too much knowledge and responsibility too quickly. The alliances that formed around the returned Avatar brought together individuals and groups whose normal differences might have prevented cooperation. Their shared recognition that preventing final Fire Nation victory required unprecedented coordination, overcoming cultural prejudices and political rivalries that had previously seemed insurmountable. Their success in working together, demonstrating possibilities for post-war cooperation that would influence reconstruction efforts once military objectives had been achieved. The liberation campaigns that followed Aang's mastery of the Avatar state required strategies that balanced military necessity with humanitarian concerns. The Avatar's presence providing capabilities that could achieve decisive results, while his moral principles demanded approaches that minimized civilian casualties and preserved infrastructure that would be needed for eventual reconstruction. The tension between effectiveness and ethics, creating dilemmas that tested everyone involved in planning and executing operations. The restoration of balance that Aang achieved through his confrontation with Fire Lord Ozai represented not just military victory, but philosophical triumph that demonstrated how individual moral courage could overcome systemic evil, institutional corruption, his refusal to compromise his principles, even when facing ultimate challenges, providing inspiration that would influence approaches to conflict resolution and social reconstruction for generations. His example showing that power could be exercised in service of justice rather than personal advantage or cultural superiority. The immediate aftermath of the war's end revealed both the scope of reconstruction challenges and the possibilities that peace could create when former enemies committed to cooperation and mutual support. The damage that century of conflict had inflicted requiring resources and coordination that no single nation could provide, while the opportunities for cultural exchange and technological sharing promised benefits that could eventually exceed what any individual society had achieved through independent development during the previous era of isolation and competition. The Industrial Revolution that transformed the world in the decades following the 100-Year War's conclusion represented humanity's most dramatic period of technological and social change since the first Avatar had separated the spirit and physical realms. The innovations and discoveries that emerged from wartime research, combining with peacetime creativity, to produce advances in manufacturing, transportation, and communication that altered daily life for millions of people while creating new possibilities for prosperity and cooperation that previous generations could never have imagined, despite their most optimistic dreams about human potential. The factories that rose throughout Republic City and other major population centers demonstrated how firebending and earthbending could be applied to industrial processes on scales that individual artisans had never been able to achieve. Their steam-powered machinery and assembly line techniques enabling mass production of goods that had previously been luxury items available only to wealthy elites. The democratization of material comfort creating social changes that went far beyond simple economic improvement to encompass fundamental shifts in how people understood their place in society and their expectations for personal advancement. The transportation networks that connected previously isolated communities transformed both commerce and culture through railways and steamships that could carry people and goods across vast distances with speed and reliability that made regional specialization economically viable, while enabling cultural exchange that enriched local traditions through exposure to new ideas and artistic influences. The mobility that such systems provided, creating opportunities for adventure and education that had been unthinkable when travel required months of dangerous journey through hostile territory. Metalbending's emergence as a distinct discipline within earthbending practice represented more than simple technical innovation. Its development revealing how traditional elemental categories could evolve and expand when practitioners approached their abilities with creativity and determination, rather than accepting established limitations as permanent boundaries. Toph's breakthrough in perceiving and manipulating refined metals, opening possibilities that would transform architecture, manufacturing, and law enforcement, while demonstrating that bending arts were living traditions capable of growth and adaptation. The metal-bending police force that Toph established in Republic City provided new models for law enforcement that took advantage of unique capabilities while maintaining ethical standards that served community needs rather than simply imposing authority through superior power. Their techniques for restraining criminals and protecting civilians, demonstrating how specialized bending skills could be applied to public service in ways that complemented rather than replaced traditional approaches to maintaining order and protecting vulnerable populations from exploitation or violence. The equalist movement that emerged during this period of rapid change reflected legitimate concerns about how technological advancement and bending abilities were creating new forms of inequality and social stratification that threatened democratic ideals and equal opportunity. Their grievances highlighting real problems with how benefits of progress were being distributed, while their methods revealed how frustrated populations could be manipulated by charismatic leaders whose solutions created greater problems than those they claimed to address through revolutionary transformation. Eamon's leadership of the equalist cause demonstrated how personal trauma and ideological conviction could combine to produce individuals capable of inspiring mass movements, while remaining fundamentally corrupted by the very forces they claimed to oppose. His blood-bending abilities and deceptive practices, revealing how easily populist rhetoric could mask authoritarian ambitions that served personal revenge rather than genuine social justice. His influence showing both the power and the danger inherent in movements that promised simple solutions to complex problems. The technological warfare that characterized conflicts during this period included weapons and vehicles that amplified individual bending abilities, while also providing non-benders with tools that could level playing fields that had previously been dominated by elemental practitioners. The development of such technologies, reflecting both human ingenuity and the competitive pressures that drove innovation, when different groups sought advantages over rivals or protection from threats that conventional methods could not adequately address. The airships and tanks that became symbols of this era's military capabilities represented engineering achievements that combined traditional metalworking with new understanding of aerodynamics and mechanical principles, their construction requiring coordination between different types of benders, while their operation demonstrated how technology could enhance rather than replace human abilities. Their effectiveness changing strategic thinking about how conflicts could be conducted and resolved. The spirit vines that began appearing throughout Republic City during the later stages of this period carried energies that defied conventional scientific analysis, while providing resources that could power new forms of technology. Their growth patterns and behavioral characteristics suggesting intelligence and purpose that transcended normal botanical categories, while their integration into urban environments created opportunities and challenges that no previous generation had faced. The research that scientists and spiritual practitioners conducted into spirit vine properties revealed connections between technological and spiritual realms that challenged traditional assumptions about the separation between physical and metaphysical phenomena. Their discoveries suggesting possibilities for innovations that could transcend current limitations, while also warning about potential consequences of manipulating forces that operated according to principles beyond human understanding or control. Varric's entrepreneurial ventures during this period demonstrated both the creative potential and the ethical dangers that accompanied rapid technological development. His projects ranging from legitimate innovations that improved quality of life to schemes that prioritized profit over public welfare, while his personality embodied both the visionary thinking and the moral flexibility that characterized many of the era's most influential figures. The mover industry that Varric helped establish provided new forms of entertainment and communication that could reach audiences throughout the world. The stories and images that these productions conveyed influencing public opinion and cultural values, while also creating economic opportunities for performers and technicians whose skills had never previously been valued in commercial contexts. The medium's power to shape perceptions, demonstrating both its potential for education and its capacity for propaganda. Harmonic Convergence's approach represented the culmination of spiritual and technological developments that had been building throughout this period, the celestial event's significance extending beyond astronomical phenomena to encompass fundamental changes in the relationship between physical and spirit worlds that would alter every aspect of human existence, while creating challenges that would require new forms of cooperation and understanding between different approaches to knowledge and problem solving. The portal openings that occurred during harmonic convergence restored connections between realms that had been severed since Avatar 1's time. Their reactivation, enabling spirit world inhabitants to enter physical reality while providing humans with access to spiritual dimensions that had been theoretical concepts rather than accessible destinations. The reunion of separated worlds, creating possibilities for growth and learning while also generating conflicts that would require careful management. The airbending renaissance that followed these cosmic changes represented hope for cultural restoration that had seemed impossible after the air nomads' genocide. The emergence of new airbenders throughout the world providing opportunities to rebuild traditions and communities, while also creating challenges about how ancient wisdom could be adapted to contemporary circumstances and integrated with modern lifestyles and responsibilities. Janora's spiritual abilities and leadership among the new airbenders demonstrated how younger generations could serve as bridges between traditional knowledge and innovative applications. Her natural aptitude for spiritual practices, combining with her understanding of contemporary challenges to create approaches that honored historical precedents while serving present needs. Her influence helping to establish educational methods and community structures that could support cultural revival. The Air Nation's reconstruction under Tenzin's guidance reflected both the possibilities and the limitations inherent in attempting to restore cultures that had been interrupted for over a century. Their efforts to preserve essential principles while adapting to changed circumstances, creating synthesis between historical authenticity and practical necessity, their success providing models for how other communities might recover from cultural devastation while maintaining their essential identity. The technological integration of spirit, vine energy into industrial and transportation systems created capabilities that exceeded anything previously achieved through conventional power sources, yet the spiritual dimensions of such energy required approaches that combined engineering expertise with spiritual sensitivity. The development of hybrid technologies, demonstrating how traditional boundaries between science and spirituality might need to be reconsidered when dealing with phenomena that operated according to both physical and metaphysical principles. The social changes that accompanied these technological and spiritual developments transformed urban life throughout the world, with cities becoming centers of innovation and cultural mixing, while rural areas experienced different pressures as traditional lifestyles adapted to new economic realities and transportation systems that connected previously isolated communities to global networks of trade and communication that brought both opportunities and challenges. The educational institutions that emerged during this period reflected growing understanding that preparing young people for rapidly changing world required curricula that combined traditional knowledge with contemporary skills, their programs integrating bending instruction with scientific education, while also emphasizing critical thinking and cultural sensitivity that would enable graduates to navigate complex social and technological environments. The artistic movements that flourished during this era of transformation produced works that explored themes of change and adaptation while experimenting with new media and techniques that took advantage of technological innovations. Their creators finding ways to express both excitement about possibilities and anxiety about consequences that rapid development might produce, their contributions enriching cultural life while providing perspectives that purely technical analysis might miss. The international relationships that developed during this period reflected both the opportunities that improved communication and transportation created, and the tensions that emerged when different nations pursued competing approaches to technological development and social organization. The diplomatic challenges requiring new forms of cooperation and conflict resolution that could address problems transcending traditional territorial and cultural boundaries. The environmental consequences of industrial development became increasingly apparent as manufacturing expanded and resource consumption accelerated beyond sustainable levels. The pollution and habitat destruction that accompanied economic growth, creating problems that would require technological solutions and policy responses that balanced human needs with ecological preservation. The recognition of such challenges, establishing environmental protection as legitimate concern for governmental and individual action. The labor movements that organized during this period reflected workers' efforts to ensure that industrial prosperity benefited everyone, rather than concentrating wealth and power among factory owners and investors. Their struggles for fair wages and safe working conditions, demonstrating how technological progress could create new forms of exploitation, unless accompanied by social reforms that protected vulnerable populations from economic and political abuse. The religious and philosophical responses to rapid change included both traditional communities that sought to preserve established values and innovative movements that explored how spiritual principles might be applied to contemporary challenges, their diverse approaches reflecting human creativity in finding meaning and purpose during periods of uncertainty, while their conflicts revealed tensions between different visions of how society should develop and what priorities should guide collective decision-making. As this era of unprecedented transformation continued to unfold, the foundations were being established for even more dramatic changes that would challenge every assumption about the relationship between human civilization and the cosmic forces that had shaped existence since the beginning of time. The integration of spiritual and technological capabilities, creating possibilities that would test the wisdom and character of future generations who would inherit both the achievements and the responsibilities that such power would create. The Republic City that welcomed Avatar Korra's arrival represented humanity's boldest experiment in multicultural cooperation and technological innovation. Its gleaming towers and bustling streets demonstrating how the four nations could work together to create something entirely new, while its challenges revealed the complexities that emerged when traditional boundaries dissolved. Different peoples attempted to build shared institutions that served everyone's needs without sacrificing the distinct identities that made each culture valuable and unique. Korra's unconventional upbringing in the Southern Water Tribe's compound had provided her with unprecedented security and intensive training in 3 of the 4 elements from earliest childhood. Yet this protection had also isolated her from the real world's complexities and contradictions in ways that left her unprepared for the sophisticated political and social challenges that awaited her in a modern urban environment where Avatar authority could not simply override democratic processes or ignore legitimate grievances that required negotiation rather than force. The discovery of her Avatar status at the remarkably young age of 4 had led to educational approaches that emphasized practical skills and elemental mastery, while perhaps neglecting the spiritual development and cultural sensitivity that previous avatars had gained through extensive travel and exposure to diverse communities. Her prodigious abilities in combat and bending, creating confidence that would prove both asset and liability when facing opponents who understood that raw power alone was insufficient for addressing the root causes of social conflict. The airbending training that brought Korra to Republic City under Tenzin's guidance represented her first sustained contact with air nomad philosophy and its emphasis on spiritual balance and detachment from worldly concerns. The contrast between her naturally assertive personality and the patience and flexibility that airbending required, creating internal struggles that reflected broader questions about how traditional wisdom could be adapted to contemporary challenges that seemed to demand immediate action rather than contemplative response. The pro-bending arena that captured Korra's imagination during her early days in the city demonstrated how elemental arts had evolved from ancient martial disciplines into modern sports entertainment, the techniques and strategies that competitors employed, showing how traditional bending could be adapted for new purposes, while the popularity of such spectacles revealed changing attitudes toward abilities that had once been considered sacred gifts rather than skills to be displayed for public amusement and commercial profit. The equalist movement that dominated Republic City's political landscape during Korra's arrival reflected genuine concerns about inequality and social justice that industrialization had created or amplified. Yet Amon's leadership revealed how legitimate grievances could be exploited by individuals whose personal agendas corrupted even well-intentioned reforms. His ability to remove bending through bloodbending, representing both the movement's ultimate hypocrisy and the danger that charismatic leaders posed when their methods contradicted their stated principles. The Kai-blocking techniques that equalist fighters employed demonstrated how non-benders could develop martial skills that neutralized elemental advantages through precision and training, rather than relying on technological solutions or political reforms, their effectiveness proving that human potential could transcend apparent limitations, while their application in service of extremist causes showed how even admirable achievements could be perverted when motivated by resentment rather than genuine desire for justice and equality. The revelation of Amon's true identity as Noatak, a waterbending prodigy whose childhood trauma had twisted his understanding of power and justice, provided tragic illustration of how family dysfunction and ideological extremism could destroy individuals who might otherwise have contributed positively to society. His brother Tarlok's parallel descent into authoritarianism, demonstrating how shared experiences of abuse could produce different but equally destructive responses to pain and powerlessness. The spiritual crisis that emerged during Korra's early Avatar career reflected her difficulty in accessing the meditative states and cosmic connections that had enabled previous avatars to communicate with their past lives and channel the accumulated wisdom of the Avatar cycle. Her struggles with traditional spiritual practices revealing how cultural changes and individual personality differences could affect the fundamental relationships between Avatar consciousness and the eternal patterns that provided continuity across incarnations. The dark Avatar crisis that followed harmonic convergence represented the most existential threat that any Avatar had faced since one's original confrontation with Vaatu, the return of chaos and darkness to the physical world, creating challenges that transcended political or social problems to encompass the basic structure of reality itself. Unalaq's fusion with Vaatu demonstrating how spiritual knowledge could be corrupted when combined with personal ambition and cultural supremacist ideologies that justified any means in pursuit of supposedly noble ends. The destruction of the Avatar cycle during Korra's battle with the Dark Avatar represented loss that seemed to invalidate everything that 10,000 years of Avatar service had achieved. Her separation from past lives, eliminating sources of guidance and strength that had sustained every previous incarnation, while forcing her to discover entirely new approaches to cosmic responsibility that could function without the forcings housing accumulated wisdom and experience that had previously defined Avatar identity and capability. The restoration of the Avatar spirit through Korra's connection with cosmic energy demonstrated that spiritual continuity could be maintained through different mechanisms than traditional reincarnation patterns. Her ability to access universal forces directly rather than through inherited memories, suggesting that Avatar power derived from fundamental cosmic principles rather than simple accumulation of individual experiences. Her breakthrough creating precedents that would influence future understanding of spiritual development. The decision to leave the spirit portals open following the Dark Avatar's defeat represented fundamental revision of policies that had governed human-spirit relations since one's time. Korra's choice reflecting her belief that separation between worlds had created more problems than it solved, while recognizing that integration would require new approaches to managing relationships between different forms of consciousness and existence that had evolved separately for millennia. The Red Lotus conspiracy that emerged during the following period represented anarchist philosophy taken to its logical extreme, the organization's members believing that all forms of government and institutional authority were inherently oppressive, and that true freedom could only be achieved through complete elimination of political structures and social hierarchies, their methods demonstrating how noble ideals could justify terrible actions when pursued without consideration for practical consequences or human welfare. Zahir's transformation from imprisoned philosopher into deadly airbending master following harmonic convergence showed how spiritual abilities could manifest in individuals whose worldviews had been shaped by radical politics rather than traditional wisdom, his natural talent for airbending techniques, combining with his extremist ideology to create approaches that violated every principle that air nomad culture had developed over millennia, while demonstrating the destructive potential inherent in elemental abilities when divorced from moral restraint. The poisoning that nearly killed Korra during her confrontation with the Red Lotus created physical and psychological trauma that would influence her effectiveness and worldview for years afterward. The mercury-based toxin's effects, extending beyond immediate health consequences to encompass spiritual damage that interfered with her avatar abilities, while the experience of helplessness and near death challenged her fundamental assumptions about her role and capabilities as Cosmic Guardian. The recovery process that followed required Korra to rebuild not just physical strength, but psychological resilience and spiritual connection that the poison and trauma had damaged. Her struggles with depression and self-doubt, reflecting how even avatars could be affected by mental health challenges that required professional treatment and personal growth, rather than simply spiritual discipline or elemental training. Her journey toward healing, demonstrating that strength sometimes meant accepting vulnerability and seeking help. The Earth Empire crisis that dominated the final phase of Korra's active avatar career represented the dangers that technological advancement posed when combined with authoritarian leadership and nationalist ideology. Kuvira's vision of unifying the Earth Kingdom through force and industrial efficiency, echoing historical patterns while employing capabilities that made such ambitions more dangerous and destructive than previous attempts at imperial expansion and political consolidation. The Spirit Vine technology that Kuvira weaponized demonstrated how discoveries intended for beneficial purposes could be perverted into tools of mass destruction when controlled by individuals who prioritized power over welfare. The energy cannon that threatened Republic City, representing the ultimate fusion of spiritual and technological capabilities in service of goals that violated every principle that such synthesis was supposed to serve according to its creator's original intentions. The final confrontation between Korra and Kuvira in the spirit world revealed both the Avatar's growth in understanding spiritual principles and her ability to extend compassion even toward enemies whose actions had caused tremendous suffering. Her success in reaching the dictator's humanity, rather than simply overpowering her, representing evolution in Avatar philosophy that emphasized healing and redemption over punishment and domination. The sacrifice that Korra made to protect Kuvira from the spirit energy explosion demonstrated the kind of selfless courage that defined true Avatar service, her willingness to risk her own life for someone who had been her enemy, showing how spiritual development could transform natural human instincts towards self-preservation and revenge into commitment to universal welfare that transcended personal considerations or cultural loyalties. The new spirit portal that emerged from this final battle created permanent connection between Republic City and the spirit world that symbolized the integration of realms that had been Korra's primary achievement as Avatar. Her legacy, including not just the prevention of specific disasters, but the fundamental transformation of how humans and spirits could relate to each other and share the world that both groups called home. The relationship between Korra and Asami that culminated in their romantic partnership represented personal happiness that had been earned through years of friendship and mutual support during the most challenging periods of their Sami lives, their love providing foundation for individual growth while demonstrating how intimate relationships could complement rather than compete with cosmic responsibilities and public service. The vacation that concluded Korra's documented Avatar career provided opportunity for rest and reflection that acknowledged the importance of personal renewal and private happiness in maintaining the psychological health necessary for effective cosmic service. Their journey into the spirit world, representing both celebration of their relationship and continued exploration of possibilities that the reunited realms offered for growth and adventure. The Air Nation's revival, under the guidance of Jinora and other new airbenders, created hope that cultural restoration could succeed even after apparent total destruction. Their adaptation of ancient wisdom to contemporary circumstances, providing models for how traditions could evolve while maintaining their essential character. Their service as peacekeepers and mediators, demonstrating how spiritual disciplines could contribute to global stability. The technological developments that continued throughout Korra's era included innovations that improved quality of life, while also creating new forms of power that required careful regulation and ethical oversight. The balance between progress and responsibility, reflecting ongoing challenges about how human creativity and ambition could be channeled toward beneficial purposes rather than destructive competition or exploitation. The international cooperation that emerged from repeated crises demonstrated humanity's capacity to overcome cultural differences and historical grievances when faced with threats that transcended national boundaries. The alliances and institutions that developed providing foundations for continued peaceful coexistence, while acknowledging that such achievements required constant vigilance and renewed commitment from each generation. The spiritual awakening that characterized the later years of Korra's career included not just the return of airbending and the opening of spirit portals, but broader recognition that technological advancement without spiritual development created imbalances that threatened both individual welfare and social stability, the integration of these dimensions becoming essential for healthy human development and sustainable civilization. As Korra's active service as Avatar drew toward its documented conclusion, the world she left behind was more interconnected and spiritually aware than any previous generation had known. Yet it also faced challenges that required new forms of wisdom and cooperation that could build upon her achievements, while addressing problems that her reforms had created or revealed. The eternal cycle of growth and adaptation continuing through forms that honored her contributions, while transcending her individual limitations and circumstances. The expanded universe that grew beyond the original Avatar narratives revealed depths and complexities within familiar characters and cultures that television episodes and films could only hint at through brief glimpses and compressed storytelling. These additional chronicles providing opportunities to explore the psychological motivations and historical contexts that shaped pivotal decisions, while illuminating the broader social and political forces that influenced individual destinies throughout the Avatar world's rich and tumultuous history. Avatar Kyoshi's rise from humble peasant origins to legendary earthbender represented one of the most dramatic transformations in Avatar history. Her journey from forgotten servant in Yokoya village to immortal warrior who shaped the Earth Kingdom for over 2 centuries, demonstrating how cosmic responsibility could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, while revealing the personal costs and moral complexities that accompanied such unprecedented power and longevity in a world that demanded decisive action over careful contemplation. The political intrigue that surrounded Kyoshi's early years as Avatar exposed the corruption and institutional decay that had infected Earth Kingdom governance for generations. The machinations of figures like Jianzhu and the false Avatar Yun, illustrating how spiritual authority could be manipulated by political interests, while demonstrating the dangerous consequences that followed when cosmic power became entangled with earthly ambitions that prioritized immediate Tumain. advantages over long-term stability and justice. The flying opera company that served as Kiyoshi's chosen family and training ground operated outside conventional social boundaries and moral categories, their members united by shared experiences of rejection and marginalization that created bonds stronger than blood relationships, while their unconventional methods and questionable activities provided education in survival skills and moral flexibility that formal avatar training could never have, supplied through traditional institutional frameworks. The Daofe culture that Kiyoshi encountered through her association with the Flying Opera Company revealed alternative approaches to honor and community that challenged established assumptions about law and order, their codes of conduct, and mutual loyalty, demonstrating how marginalized populations could create their own systems of justice and protection when legitimate authorities failed to serve their needs or actively oppressed them through policies that preserved existing hierarchies at the expense of fairness and human dignity. The immortality techniques that enabled Kiyoshi's extended lifespan represented mastery of spiritual principles that went beyond normal avatar abilities to encompass fundamental manipulation of life force itself. Her understanding of how consciousness could maintain connection with physical form across centuries, providing insights into the nature of existence that challenged conventional assumptions about aging, death, and the relationship between mortal identity and eternal spiritual essence. The colonial period that followed the 100-Year War created unprecedented challenges for Avatar Aang and Fire Lord Zuko as they attempted to balance justice with practicality in addressing the complex legacies of occupation and settlement that had developed over decades of Fire Nation expansion. Their efforts to resolve territorial disputes and cultural conflicts, revealing how peace could be more difficult to achieve than military victory, when competing claims seemed equally legitimate and mutually incompatible. The Harmony Restoration movement that initially promised clean solutions to colonial complications proved inadequate when confronted with the human realities of mixed families and integrated communities that had developed their own identities and loyalties over generations of coexistence. The original plan to simply return all Fire Nation colonists to their homeland, ignoring the bonds and investments that made such displacement as traumatic as the original conquests had been for their victims. Yu Dao's transformation from Fire Nation colony into the first city of the United Republic demonstrated how creative political solutions could transcend traditional categories of national sovereignty and cultural identity. The establishment of autonomous regions that owed allegiance to neither Earth Kingdom nor Fire Nation, providing precedents for new forms of governance that could serve populations whose heritage and interests crossed established boundaries in ways that existing institutions could not accommodate. Effectively, the Yangchen Festival crisis that brought Avatar Aang into conflict with General Old Iron revealed how ancient spiritual grievances could resurface to threaten contemporary communities when industrial development and cultural change disrupted balances that had been maintained through traditional practices and mutual understanding. The spirit's rage over Lady Tianhai's death, demonstrating how past traumas could influence present conflicts in ways that purely political solutions could never address adequately. Republic City's founding as the capital of the United Republic represented humanity's most ambitious attempt to create truly multicultural institutions that could serve all four nations equally while preserving their distinct traditions and approaches to common challenges. The city's architecture and governance structures demonstrating how cooperation could produce achievements that no single culture could accomplish independently, while its early struggles revealed the ongoing work required to maintain such delicate balances. The equalist uprising that threatened Republic City during Avatar Korra's early career reflected legitimate concerns about how bending abilities and technological advantages were creating new forms of social stratification and pudding two forms of social stratification. Economic inequality that democratic ideals were supposed to prevent. Amon's movement gaining support through appeals to fairness and equal opportunity, while his methods revealed how populist rhetoric could mask authoritarian ambitions that ultimately served personal revenge rather than genuine social justice. The blood-bending legacy that connected Yakone's criminal empire to his son's later roles in both equalist leadership and water tribe politics demonstrated how family trauma and inherited abilities could shape individual destinies across generations. The different paths that Noatak and Tarlok chose in response to their shared childhood experiences, illustrating how similar circumstances could produce radically different approaches to power and responsibility, while both ultimately led to tragedy and destruction. The spiritual research that accelerated during the industrial period included investigations into avatar phenomena and reincarnation cycles that combined traditional wisdom with modern analytical methods. Scholars and practitioners working to understand how consciousness could maintain continuity across lifetimes, while adapting to different cultural contexts and historical circumstances. Their discoveries providing insights that influence both spiritual practice and technological development in ways that bridged ancient knowledge and contemporary innovation. The metal-bending police force that Toph established in Republic City created new paradigms for law enforcement that took advantage of unique abilities while maintaining ethical standards and community accountability that prevented abuse of power. Their techniques for restraining criminals and protecting civilians, demonstrating how specialized skills could be applied to public service in ways that enhanced rather than replaced traditional approaches to maintaining order and protecting vulnerable populations from exploitation or violence. The White Lotus organization's evolution from secret scholarly society to international peacekeeping force reflected changing global circumstances that required new approaches to maintaining stability and preventing conflicts that could escalate beyond regional boundaries. Their network of members from all nations, providing resources for intelligence gathering and diplomatic intervention that could address problems before they developed into crises requiring avatar involvement or military solutions. The archaeological discoveries that occurred throughout the post-war period revealed evidence of pre-avatar civilizations and spiritual traditions that had been lost or suppressed during millennia of cultural change and political upheaval. These findings suggesting that human understanding of bending and spiritual principles represented only partial recovery of knowledge systems that had once been more comprehensive and sophisticated than contemporary practitioners realized. The Fire Nation's internal struggles with imperial legacy and democratic transition created ongoing challenges for Fire Lord Zuko and his successors as they worked to transform authoritarian institutions into systems that could serve their people's welfare while maintaining stability during periods of rapid social and economic change. Their efforts demonstrating how political reform required not just new laws, but cultural transformation that could take generations to accomplish completely. The Southern Water Tribe's development from scattered settlements into unified nation reflected both the opportunities that peace created and the tensions that arose when traditional ways of life encountered modern economic and political pressures. Their success in maintaining cultural identity while adapting to global integration, providing models for how small societies could preserve their essential character while participating fully in international cooperation and technological advancement. The Northern Water Tribe's gradual reform of gender restrictions and social hierarchies demonstrated how even conservative societies could evolve when confronted with evidence that their traditional practices limited human potential and violated principles of equality and justice that they claimed to uphold. The changes that occurred following Katara's challenge to Master Pakku, creating precedents that influenced social development throughout the water tribes and beyond. The Air Nation's reconstruction under Tenzin's leadership faced unique challenges in attempting to restore traditions and communities that had been completely destroyed, their efforts requiring adaptation of ancient practices to contemporary circumstances, while training new airbenders who brought different cultural backgrounds and perspectives to spiritual disciplines that had previously been transmitted through unbroken lineages of master and student relationships. The technological innovations that emerged from Spirit Vine research created capabilities that exceeded anything previously achieved through conventional engineering or bending applications. Yet the spiritual dimensions of such energy required approaches that combined scientific analysis with traditional wisdom about consciousness and cosmic forces. The development of hybrid technologies, demonstrating how different knowledge systems could complement rather than compete with each other. The international trade relationships that developed during the peaceful periods created economic interdependence that provided incentives for continued cooperation, while also generating competition and disputes that required careful management to prevent escalation into political conflicts. The merchants and entrepreneurs who facilitated such commerce serving as informal ambassadors, whose personal relationships often proved more effective than official diplomacy in maintaining communication and understanding. The educational institutions that emerged to serve the new multicultural society needed curricula that could prepare students for a rapidly changing world while preserving essential knowledge and cultural values from their respective traditions. Their programs integrating practical skills with philosophical wisdom while emphasizing critical thinking and cultural sensitivity that could enable graduates to contribute positively to increasingly complex global civilization. The artistic movements that flourished during periods of peace and prosperity produced works that explored themes of identity and belonging while experimenting with fusion techniques that drew from multiple cultural traditions, their creators finding ways to express both individual vision and collective experience, while contributing to evolving cultural synthesis that honored diverse heritage, while creating something entirely new. The scientific advances that occurred when scholars from different nations could collaborate freely included discoveries about bending that revealed connections between elemental abilities and broader principles of physics and biology that had been hidden when knowledge was fragmented by political boundaries and cultural prejudices. Their research providing foundations for technological applications that could benefit everyone while deepening understanding of natural phenomena. As the expanded universe continued to grow through new stories and explorations of familiar characters in unfamiliar circumstances, the Avatar world revealed itself to be a cosmos of infinite complexity and possibility, where every individual choice created ripples that influenced outcomes across generations, while every cultural tradition contributed essential wisdom to humanity's ongoing project of learning how to live together peacefully, while pursuing both individual fulfillment and collective prosperity that could endure through whatever challenges the future might bring. The philosophy of balance that permeates every aspect of Avatar lore draws its deepest inspiration from ancient Eastern wisdom traditions that understood the universe as a dynamic interplay between complementary forces whose apparent opposition actually creates the harmony necessary for existence itself to continue. Their eternal dance of creation and destruction, expansion and contraction, light and darkness, providing the fundamental rhythm that governs everything from individual consciousness to cosmic cycles that span millennia, while teaching that true stability emerges not from eliminating conflict, but from maintaining equilibrium between forces that must remain in creative tension. The four elements that define the Avatar world represent more than simple categories of bending techniques or national identities. Their deeper significance, encompassing fundamental aspects of human psychology and spiritual development that transcend cultural boundaries, to reveal universal patterns in how consciousness relates to the physical world and the challenges that every individual must face during their journey toward wisdom and self-actualization, each elemental philosophy offering essential insights that remain incomplete without integration with the complementary perspectives that the other traditions provide. Air's emphasis on freedom and spiritual detachment reflects humanity's need for transcendence beyond material concerns and ego attachments that create suffering through their inevitable impermanence. The Air Nomads' practices, demonstrating how conscious beings can maintain inner peace regardless of external circumstances, while their commitment to non-violence reveals the strength that comes from refusing to perpetuate cycles of harm and retaliation that diminish everyone involved in conflicts that could be resolved through understanding rather than force. Water's fluid adaptability and focus on change demonstrates the importance of flexibility and emotional intelligence in navigating life's constant transformations. The Water Tribe's healing traditions, showing how consciousness can be applied to restoration and growth rather than merely survival or competition, while their connection to lunar cycles reflects deep understanding of how individual well-being depends upon alignment with natural rhythms that operate beyond human control, but within human capacity to harmonize with through patience and observation. Earth's stability and persistence embody the necessity of firm foundations and unwavering commitment to principles and values that provide meaning and direction during periods of uncertainty and challenge. The Earth Kingdom's achievements in architecture and governance, demonstrating how patience and determination can accomplish seemingly impossible goals when sustained effort is applied consistently over extended periods, while their emphasis on waiting and listening reveals wisdom in choosing appropriate moments for action rather than rushing toward premature solutions. Fire's passion and drive represent the creative energy and transformative power that enable individuals and societies to grow beyond their current limitations and achieve their highest potential. The Fire Nation's innovations in technology and administration, showing how focused, intention, and disciplined effort can reshape material conditions, while their understanding of fire as life force rather than mere destruction reveals how apparent aggression can serve constructive purposes when properly channeled through wisdom and ethical consideration for others' welfare. The Avatar's role as master of all four elements symbolizes the integrated consciousness that emerges when individual beings learn to balance these different aspects of their nature, rather than identifying exclusively with particular approaches that create internal conflict and external friction through their incompleteness. The Avatar state providing access to wisdom that transcends any single perspective, while demonstrating how cosmic responsibility requires surrendering personal preferences in favor of solutions that serve universal harmony, even when such choix demandent significant personnel sacrifice. The reincarnation cycle that maintains avatar continuity across lifetimes reflects spiritual principles about consciousness that exist independently of particular cultural beliefs about death and rebirth. The pattern of incarnation, in each nation demonstrating how universal wisdom must be expressed through diverse forms that speak to different people's needs and understanding, while the accumulation of experience across multiple lives suggests that individual growth continues beyond single incarnations through processes that modern psychology might describe as collective unconscious or inherited wisdom. The relationship between individual avatar development and cosmic responsibility illustrates fundamental tensions that every conscious being faces between personal desires and ethical obligations to larger communities. The various avatars' different approaches to resolving these conflicts, providing examples of how similar challenges can be addressed through methods that reflect individual personality and cultural background while serving the same essential function of maintaining balance between competing forces that could otherwise destroy the foundations upon which civilized existence depends. The recurring themes of sacrifice and service that appear throughout avatar narratives reflect spiritual insights about how meaning and fulfillment emerge through dedication to purposes that transcend immediate self-interest. The willingness to endure hardship and loss for the welfare of others, demonstrating how individual consciousness can expand beyond ego boundaries to encompass identification with universal well-being that transforms suffering from meaningless burden into meaningful contribution to cosmic harmony and the continued evolution of consciousness itself. The cycles of conflict and resolution that characterize avatar history reveal patterns that operate throughout human experience, regardless of particular cultural context or historical period. The emergence of threats, followed by heroic responses, and eventual restoration of peace, demonstrating how crisis creates opportunities for growth and transformation that might not occur during periods of comfort and stability. The challenges that each generation faces, requiring fresh solutions, while drawing upon wisdom accumulated through previous encounters with similar problems. The importance of spiritual connection in technological ages reflects ongoing human need for meaning and purpose that material prosperity alone cannot satisfy. The avatar world's various periods of industrial development and their associated social problems, illustrating how external progress, without corresponding internal growth, creates imbalances that manifest as inequality, environmental destruction, and spiritual emptiness that no amount of technological innovation can resolve without fundamental changes in consciousness and values that prioritize wisdom over mere efficiency. The role of community and relationship in avatar stories emphasizes how individual development occurs through interaction with others, whose different perspectives and capabilities provide essential support and challenge for personal growth. Team Avatar's various configurations demonstrating how friendship and love create strength that exceeds the sum of individual abilities, while their conflicts and reconciliations show how healthy relationships require ongoing work and mutual commitment to growth, rather than simple compatibility or shared interests. The spiritual dimensions that underlie political and social conflicts throughout Avatar lore suggest that external problems often reflect internal imbalances that cannot be resolved through purely material solutions. The various villains' motivations revealing how personal trauma and spiritual disconnection create destructive behaviors that harm not only their victims but ultimately the perpetrators themselves. Their defeat requiring not just superior force but understanding and compassion that can address root causes rather than merely treating symptoms. The environmental themes that appear throughout Avatar narratives reflect growing awareness of humanity's impact on natural systems and the need for approaches to development that consider long-term consequences rather than immediate benefits. The spirit world's responses to human activity demonstrating how actions taken without regard for broader ecological relationships inevitably create problems that require far more effort to resolve than would have been needed to prevent them through wiser initial choices. The educational philosophies that different Avatar cultures developed reveal various approaches to human development that emphasize different aspects of potential while remaining incomplete without integration with complementary methods. The air nomad's spiritual focus, the water tribe's emotional intelligence, the earth kingdom's practical skills, and the fire nation's technological innovation, each contributing essential elements to comprehensive education that serves both individual fulfillment and social responsibility. The artistic and cultural expressions that flourish throughout Avatar civilizations demonstrate how creativity serves not merely entertainment or aesthetic pleasure, but essential functions in preserving wisdom and inspiring continued growth toward higher possibilities. The various forms of music, literature, architecture, and performance that characterize each nation, providing unique contributions to human understanding, while their synthesis during peaceful periods creates new forms of beauty and meaning that transcend their origins. The leadership models that Avatar characters exemplify range from authoritarian control through democratic cooperation to spiritual guidance, their various successes and failures illustrating how different circumstances require different approaches. While certain principles remain constant across all effective leadership, regardless of particular methods or cultural context, the ability to inspire others toward positive action while maintaining ethical standards that prevent abuse of power or exploitation of followers' trust and devotion. The healing traditions that appear throughout Avatar lore encompass not just medical treatment of physical ailments, but psychological and spiritual restoration that addresses whole persons rather than merely symptoms. The various practitioners' methods demonstrating how true healing requires understanding of connections between mind, body, and spirit that conventional approaches often overlook, while their success depends upon relationship and trust between healer and patient that cannot be reduced to simple, technical procedures. As these philosophical themes weave throughout Avatar narratives across different time periods and cultural contexts, they reveal universal patterns in human experience that transcend the particular details of fantasy adventure stories to address fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, growth, and responsibility that every conscious being must answer through their choices and actions. The Avatar world serving as both mirror and map for readers seeking guidance in their own journeys toward wisdom, compassion, and the kind of integrated consciousness that can contribute positively to the ongoing evolution of awareness that connects all existence in webs of mutual dependence and shared destiny. And so we complete our journey through 10,000 years of Avatar lore, from the primordial age of spirits to the modern era of technological wonder. We have witnessed the eternal dance between order and chaos, seen how each avatar faced unique challenges while drawing upon the accumulated wisdom of their predecessors, and observed how the fundamental questions of balance, responsibility, and growth echo across every generation. The Avatar cycle teaches us that change is the only constant, that every ending births a new beginning, and that wisdom comes not from avoiding conflict, but from learning how to restore harmony when balance is lost. Whether facing ancient spirits or modern innovations, personal growth, or cosmic responsibility. The Avatar's journey reflects our own struggles to find meaning and purpose in an ever-changing world. As you drift toward peaceful slumber, carry with you the timeless lessons of the Avatar, that every soul has the potential for growth, that balance requires constant vigilance and adjustment, and that true strength lies not in the power to control, but in the wisdom to guide, heal, and protect. Rest well, knowing that like the Avatar cycle itself, tomorrow brings new opportunities to restore balance to your own corner of the world.